Good morning and welcome to this formal meeting of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Nigel Pepper, Chairman of this committee. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website. And with this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public watching this live. I'd like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park and wait there. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent, please, for the duration of this meeting. Also, may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by Scrutiny Officer Chiara to my left. When invited to speak, you should press the button on your microphone unit to make it live. Then press again when you finish your contribution. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence and replacement councillors. I'm going to hand this over to you, Trina.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Gray, Councillor Lee, Councillor King and Councillor Sneath. And can I just say, Chairman, that Councillor King and Councillor Sneath are going to be observing the meeting via Teams. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Did we mention Councillor Stokes? I've heard from Councillor Stokes.
Yes, Councillor Stokes as well. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, declarations of councillors' interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest, please? No. Regarding item 5, I've sought advice and it's not considered necessary for me to declare an interest, but in the interest of openness, I'm a semi-retired funeral director and have no involvement whatsoever in management decisions and discussions, so I therefore feel able to participate. Moving on, agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting of the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee held on the 8th of November 2022. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Previous meeting minutes can be found on pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack. And I'll just go through those just for accuracy only. So page 5, 6, 7. I did pick up something on page 7, which is the fourth row down in the first bullet point. It was a fire and rescue item. Carried equipment were able to access precarious locations. In contrast, demand was negligent for rigid boats. I take it that's negligible for rigid boats, yeah? Okay, we've got the acknowledgement there from the Chief Officer, so can we make that amendment? Okay, so that's page 7, page 8, 9, 10, 11, finally page 12. So with that amendment in mind, do I have a proposer for those minutes, please? Councillor Mrs Clark, yeah? A seconder, please. Councillor Dunny. All those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Can't be any. Any abstentions? Just one abstention. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Those minutes are agreed as a correct and accurate record with the minor amendment. Okay, moving on. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. From myself, we have a lighter agenda today, even though it doesn't seem like it. However, I'd still like to remind officers that all reports presented today should be taken as read. Therefore, presenters are asked to only summarise key points of their report submitted. May I also remind members the importance of succinct questions and contributions that will allow for efficient and effective use of the time allocated for each discussion. One other announcement is that we have some mince pies somewhere, and feel free to grab a mince pie either throughout the meeting or at the end. Okay, Executive Councillor announcements. Do you have any?
Nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nothing. Okay, nothing coming online through Teams, Chiara. Okay. Councillor Sue Woolley, she's not with us today and sends her apologies, I understand, yeah. Okay. And Councillor Danny McNally, is he on Teams? Okay. Okay. Senior officer announcements then. Anything to report? Mark Baxter.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to formally welcome Assistant Chief Fire Officer Steve Topham, who's joined us in Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue as of last week. An absolute welcome addition to our leadership team, and looking forward to him coming to Public Protection and Scrutiny in the future. So we just want to welcome him as part of our leadership team. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and welcome aboard. Okay, item 5, which is the coroner's body removal and transportation re-procurement. This pre-decision scrutiny item can be found on pages 13 to 22 of the agenda pack and invites the committee to consider a report on the coroner's body removal and transport re-procurement, which is due to be considered by the Executive Councillor for NHS Liaison, Community Engagement, Registration and Coroners between the dates of 16th and the 23rd December. The views of the committee will be passed on to the Executive Councillor as part of her consideration of this item. Our actions for today are that we consider the attached report and determine whether the committee supports the recommendations to the Executive, as set out on pages 15 of the report, and agrees any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Leanne Fotherby, from Commercial and Procurement Manager, who's in the chamber, I believe, today. I can see her over there. So, over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. James Chappell, Head of Registration, will just take the committee through the first part of the report, then I'll hand over to Leanne, if that's okay with everybody.
Just apologise, I said over to you, Emma, there. It's on my paperwork here, but sorry, yeah. Work as a double act, yeah.
So I'll just take the committee through the report from a service perspective, and then Leanne will cover the procurement and the commercial side. So the Council has a statutory duty under the Coroners and Justice Act to provide for the collection and storage of bodies which fall in the jurisdiction of the coroner and the transportation of these bodies to and from post-mortem where required. The way the Council meets this duty is by contract. The Council does not have the infrastructure, as in cold storage, vehicles or staff to deliver this in service. The coroner is very happy with the current contracts which are in place, and these contracts have been in place for many years. Due to the nature of the contract and this being a very niche market, it is expected that the majority of bids will come from current suppliers due to the infrastructure that they currently have in place. An increase in volume has been factored into this report, and there is confidence that this contract will meet the levels of demand throughout. The current contract works well, we receive good feedback, and there are very little complaints received. I'll hand over to Leanne now from the procurement side.
Thank you. So we intend to take an open tender route with an overarching contract that's divided into lots for geographical location. So lots 1 to 6 relate to the coroner's removals and collections, and lots 7 to 11 relate to the coroner's post-mortem transfers. It is our intention to award to a maximum of 2 suppliers per lot to allow for sufficient flexibility, and for lots awarded to more than 1 supplier, this will be on a rota system, so 1 week on call and 1 week off, with suppliers being available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that includes bank holidays. The open tender is considered to be the preferred route to market because this is a narrow and slow-moving market. The requirement is largely the same as the current contract, with just minor amendments to the lotting structure, therefore removing some administrative burden on the council. We intend to use a 60% quality and 40% price award criteria. Quality is important to us due to this being a highly sensitive and critical service. The contracts will be awarded to the supplier or suppliers whose tender score is the highest per lot and which provides the most economically advantageous tender against the council's chosen criteria for each lot. The contracts will have an initial period of 3 years with a further extension period of 2 years available. And the current contract value is £463,000 per year, with a total contract value of 2.18 million over 5 years. The contract will have a requirement for suppliers to submit management information to the council, which includes arrival, response times, record of transfers and removals and complaints, which the council will utilise in the contract management process. The complaints process will be developed in the specification to ensure that all feedback, both positive and negative, will be recorded by suppliers as part of the management information data. We would like to invite any questions.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you. I also considered whether I should declare an interest being a funeral celebrant, but since I have no say in these contracts and don't work directly for the funeral directors in any area like this, I thought it would be okay. I do have just a question first of all, is I want to know, just to confirm for the committee, where post-mortems for people in Lincolnshire take place. That's the first part of my question. I have then another question. Thank you.
Okay, I think I know, but I'll pass you back to Leanne.
I'll take that one. So,
And James.
Post-mortems currently are held at Leicester Royal Infirmary and Hull Royal Infirmary.
Thank you. That leads into my second part of my question, and you know what I'm going to say, because I say this every time this comes up. I really dislike the fact that we don't do post-mortems in Lincolnshire. I deal with people in the midst of funeral arrangements all the time. That's what I do. And the thing that upsets people is the fact that, their deceased relative has to be taken out of county for a post-mortem, and also they often don't know where they are and how long they're going to be. The funeral can be delayed, and we also have a requirement to register deaths in 5 days. That can't be done. It just causes so much problems for families at the time, I think, that they don't need these problems. We have a medical school at the university. We have an increasing ageing population. And as James said at the beginning of what he's just said, an increase in volume is expected with this because of our demographic in Lincolnshire. And I really think we need to look at doing post-mortems in our county. And I've got to vote. I'll vote for this through gritted teeth because I really think that's so important. Thank you.
Indeed, and that's how it used to be. Post-mortems were carried out at the likes of Lincoln, Boston and Grantham, I can recall, but back over to yourselves.
Yeah, unfortunately, ULHT currently doesn't have the capability to meet the demand for post-mortem, so we have to use those hospitals which are further afield. It would be great if we could do them within the boundary of Lincolnshire, but at the moment there is not that capability within Lincolnshire to do that.
Could I just come back on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
When the post-mortems were moved out of county, I actually worked for the registration service. I was a married celebrant, and I remember being told that this would save money for the county by having the post-mortems done elsewhere. And I wasn't convinced then, and I'm not convinced now that that is the case. And once you've lost an ability to do something like this, as we did all those years ago, it's so difficult to get it back again. And I just think we need, as a council, to look at this really seriously, and I would really like those comments to go to the Executive Council, even if it's just from me and nobody else agrees with me. I feel really strongly about it. Thank you.
Okay, I do believe similar comments have been made in the past, and I think this has been looked into, but is it still being looked into, James?
We're still engaging with ULHT to see about future post-mortem provision in Lincolnshire. But it is something that at the moment we have to use those suppliers elsewhere because the facilities are not within the boundaries of Lincolnshire.
Sure. And indeed, just outside of Lincolnshire, in Peterborough, just over the border, that used to be used considerably at one time, but it's just got spread further apart, isn't it? So, yeah.
We are engaging with other suppliers, and Peterborough is one of those, and we do hope to bring those on board in the future so that we're not travelling as far as Hull and Leicester for all of the post-mortems, and those conversations do continue to take place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jamie and Leanne, for the report. I just want to draw your attention to page 18 about streamlining the service, and eventually, when the tender is successful or when your contracts have been successful, they'll be uploading the documents to the portal to the coroner's service directly. Can you tell me how safe that will be? Is that something that we need to ensure as a county council that exchange of documentation is safe and secure? Can you just expand on that a bit for me, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so we use a system which is the WPC system. It's in place across a number of coronial service in England and Wales. It has been procured through the council's procurement side. It is a safe and secure system and will aid and remove administrative burdens for those suppliers being able to feed directly into that. So there's no concerns around data protection or anything around that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, Mr Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. With regard to reinstigating the contract, how much communication did you have with the suppliers to get their views as to how the possible improvements could be made before you go ahead with the contracts? Thank you.
So we're in constant engagement with our suppliers throughout the contract. We take on board feedback throughout the contract, and engagement has taken place with those suppliers to gain their feedback in preparation for us putting this forward. The majority of feedback that we've got is really good and really positive, hence why there is not a huge amount of change in the contract, because it currently works, and there's currently a lot of satisfaction with the current contract that's out there.
Okay, thank you. I do have a number of questions myself, but I've got one from Councillor King, who's on Teams. She's saying, is there still a backlog with the Coroner's Office, please? If so, how long and what measures are in place to reduce this?
Yes, so there is a current backlog. We are currently working through that. The backlog is across several different items. So one of those is the time to inquest. That is currently being brought down at the moment. Our overall referral rate has reached a plateau now. So in the coroner's side, we're expecting about 3,000 referrals. So we've gone back to a pre-pandemic level around that. The service has just undertaken a recruitment exercise to bring in more coroner's officers. So they will help bring the backlogs down. And we have just had the approval from the Chief Coroner's Office to recruit substantively into Mr Paul Smith acting senior coroner post, so a senior coroner for Lincolnshire. So there's some really good work being done by the coroner service to bring those down. We will be doing a record number of inquests heard this year. We'll be doing over 500. Historically, we would tend to do around 380 to 400. So we are making good progress against the backlogs in the coronial side.
Okay, thank you. Just a few questions from myself then. The report mentions an increase from 1 to 2 providers for each lot. What evidence led to this decision to actually go down that route?
So as we move forward, one of the elements of feedback that we got was around the business continuity of service. So we've moved from 1 to 2. That there will always allow continuity of service in case there are any issues with any of the suppliers. So we felt that that was an appropriate level across all of those areas to deliver the service that we want to do.
Okay, thank you, James. I can recall looking at this several years ago when it was tendered for then, and I think there's various ways we looked at it. And I think one was looking at a cost breakdown for individual cases rather than a collective amount. So would that have been more appropriate to look at a case by base or conveyance of one deceased and done it that way rather than the way we're doing it now? Why have we come to this decision of doing a job lot?
So we based it on journeys rather than deceased. Quite often there will be more than one deceased per journey. So it's felt that it was more appropriate to do it in a journey system opposed to an individual case. Okay,
thank you. And page 18, the award, it mentions award criteria. But what are these made up of? Can you give us a bit more meat on the bone there about the award criteria, please?
Right. So just bear with me 1 second, I do apologise. Okay.
Says the award criteria will focus on quality in particular with a high weighting of 60%. As it is a highly sensitive and critical service and therefore is not beneficial to purely focus on price. So I think myself and the committee would like to know what the award criteria is, please.
Leanne's just going to provide an update on that side of the contract.
The award criteria will be based around the specification, so how the suppliers intend to deliver the aspects of the specification. So it will focus around areas of quality, I personally haven't seen the award criteria at the moment because it's Emma Gold, who unfortunately hasn't been able to be here today, who is the officer. But we can give you an oversight of the areas that the award criteria will focus on.
Okay, thank you. Because although the report mentions dignified empathy and professionalism, the report is largely financial, and I get why, but could ask that when tendering, are the suppliers scrutinised on, for instance, the type of vehicle they may use? Is there a maximum amount of deceased they can convey in the vehicle at the same time, for instance? Because I ask this because the suppliers will want to make the operation as cost-effective as possible in order to make a profit. So where does that fit with this tendering?
So the vehicles, yes, they have to be fit for purpose. They have to be able to store the bodies at the required temperature, and each vehicle can hold up to 4 bodies.
So 4 deceased could be conveyed to a hospital at the same time, yes?
Yes. Yeah, that's the reason we do it on journeys opposed to bodies, because we could be transporting 2, 3 or even 4 bodies at a time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And another question for me. What happens if one of the suppliers carries out a duty for whatever reason in another supplier's area? It's inevitable it's going to happen at some point in time. So how are things put right there? Are they reimbursed on a single rate, or how does that work?
So the rota place is robust, and the force control obviously allocate out. They are very, very few and far between that we have instances like that, and each one will be looked at on a case-by-case basis to make sure that if there is any reimbursement needed, then that is actioned appropriately.
Okay, I can see that probably happening in a road traffic collision or something, or just other side of the line of the border or whatever. It's going to happen at some point, so I just wondered how you're going to correct that. Yeah. Okay, thank you. The value of the contract is mentioned in the paper as £436,000 annually. Was that estimate based on the circa 1,066 removals and circa 968 return journeys for transfers annually? Is the price per collection a fixed price or not? Is the contract value dependent on the number of deaths expected within Lincolnshire for the contractual period identified? And do we have a breakdown of cost per bands of miles to be covered by the providers, and how these have changed or anticipated change in line with inflation? Quite a bit in there, but could you give us a reply to that, please?
So yes, the £400,000 is for the number of removals and transportations, so that is fixed there. There will be a fixed price for each supplier as it goes out through the bidding process. I don't have the individual breakdown of what that would be, but we can get that sent across to you as well.
Okay, if you could please. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested in that as well. And I've been using my phone to work it out. I think it looks as though they get about £214 odd per collection. That's actually not very much. If they're travelling a long way and they've got, say, 2 members of staff in a car, you've got the car costs, you've got maybe a couple of hours per member of staff, then you've got the storage costs of the body. And I'd just like to be sure that the contract is actually viable at that level. When I saw the 436,000 first, I thought, oh, that's a lot. For about 2,034 bodies, I think, are the figures quoted here for removals and return journeys for transfers. But, I mean, are we sure that that's actually going to cover everything, and that it's not too tight? Because what we don't want is a breakdown in service with the providers finding that they've accepted a contract and then can't deliver because it's too tight. Because I am aware of that happening elsewhere in a different department. So just a slight concern. I mean, I would be interested to know, what is that 214 odd pound? I mean, that's just a rough estimate, but it's very close. What is that expected to cover? You know, there's petrol, it's an awful lot.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brock. Hence I raised that question about how many deceased might be in the vehicle at the same time, because it's going to make it more cost effective. But over to you, James and Leanne.
Yeah, so we can provide a full breakdown of those costs following the meeting. When we were looking at this contract and the future viability of it, yes, there are increased costs. The contract has been increased, and what we've also done is we've also worked in a reasonable worst case financial cost if costs do continue to rise, and that is in our medium term financial plan as well.
Okay, thank you. Just one other here from me. The new service arrangements, will they provide continuity to the coronial function, and will the new arrangements mirror current ones in terms of specification and outputs?
Yes, so we are keeping it as close to the current contract as possible. The coroner is satisfied with the current arrangements and will be satisfied as well with the future arrangements.
Okay, and will providers be able to subsidise to others if they are not at capacity?
That will be something, I think, for the contractual side, and I can get back to you on that.
If you could then, please. Yeah, thank you. I think that's exhausted my questions, you'll be pleased to know. I can see no further people. Oh, sorry, Councillor Key wants to come back.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to come back again. I know I know our committee, our job today is to look at the financial side and look at all these figures and talk about bodies in cars and all that sort of thing. But because of what I do as a job, I just think we need to remember that these are actual people and families of residents of this county, and this is the most distressing and upsetting time in their lives when something like this happens, and the person that's passed away has to be referred to the coroner and go out of county for a post-mortem. It is so traumatic for some of these families. It's so distressing, I can't begin to tell you. And so I know I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it at every opportunity. We must get these post-mortems brought back into our county. It will make such a difference to the people in Lincolnshire. So I'm sorry to repeat myself, but amidst all the figures and calculations, I think we need to remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key, and I couldn't agree more, so yeah, thank you. Okay, I think we've exhausted all the questions, just looking around. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Brockman.
With your permission, and as you agree with Councillor Key, could we actually make that point a priority in our referral to the executive? I think Councillor Key is absolutely spot on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I do recall when we last had the coroner speak, and I think that was one of the questions we posed to him, and it's certainly on the radar, I do know. But yeah, if we can highlight that and also highlight some of the other issues we mentioned too. With that in mind, I'm going to propose that we endorse the report presented and support the recommendations of the Executive Councillor, and ask that these comments and suggestions from today's debate are passed on to the Executive Councillor for their consideration as recorded. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Danny, thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's unanimous, thank you. That's agreed. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is the service level performance reporting against the Success Framework 2022 to 2023, Quarter 2. This item can be found on pages 23 to 46 of the agenda pack and sets out the performance of the Tier 2 service level performance measures for this quarter. The actions for the committee are: the committee is invited to review and comment on the content of this report. The report will also be presented by Martin Parker, who is the Assistant Director for Public Protection, Will Mason, Head of Culture, Lee Surdifield, Assistant Director Corporate, Mark Baxter, Chief Officer, and Stephen Batchelor, who is the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership Senior Manager. I believe all those are in the chamber today. To make this as an efficient presentation as we can, we will take questions at the end of each update. Please be reminded that the report should be taken as read. So, firstly, over to you then, Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of ones to go through, so please bear with me. We'll start with the Stay Safe data within schools. That's our educational programme into secondary schools. Pleased to say that we are above our 80% target for last year, reaching 94% of schools. So that's 51 out of the 54 mainstream schools visited and had Stay Safe days presented to them. Also like to say that in addition to that, through 2021 and 2022, we visited an additional 21 schools that were either non-mainstream schools, referral units, specialist needs or disability schools, and also included 4 colleges and further education. So the team have been extremely busy over the 2021-2022 period. Also within Year 6 primary schools, we've delivered 6,670 pupils receive the safety workshops, and also with the under the Domestic Abuse Act, we did enhance our educational capability by employing a domestic abuse trainer to coordinate some delivery around early intervention, and through January 2020 to July 2022, 3,481 students were inputted a healthy relationships module which focused on friendships and emotions, and that program continues through to this year's program as well. So some really positive impacts in terms of our educational input into schools around a number of areas. Something that we are introducing in this year, just for the committee to be aware of, is around our questionnaire. So we obviously questionnaire those pupils that we have interaction with during schools, which was very much about, you know, the delivery package, what was being delivered, what they would like to see on the educational programme for next year. But what we've included this year is really about how those children feel safe in their communities and what their fears are within the community. So we're actually going to try and capture the voice of those children around their fears, their expectations, and where they don't feel safe amongst their communities. And then we're going to use that data to share with our neighbourhood policing colleagues within policing, but also our community safety teams, and also linked in with our Street Safe initiative that is ongoing, where people can report around where and how they feel safe. So not only are we taking an adult view, but we're taking a child view as well. So some really good stuff there. Moving on to domestic abuse, you'll see that again, what I would like to say, I think I've reported to this committee before that historically we have had trouble extracting the figures. I just want to put on record my thanks to Peter Lawton, who is the community safety analyst, who has actually been able to build a information data board that enables us to extract and view that data on now a regular daily basis, so we can see the interactions around our engagement activities with DA. So all of our data is now up to date, and we can access it now back a number of years. So you'll see with the data that's been provided today is that we are supporting again more victims in Q2 than we were Q1. So that's 1,209 victims were supported within Q2 as opposed to the 989 in Q1. Within that figure, 561 were children that were being supported either directly or indirectly, and the other 648 were adults. In addition to that, the service has also assisted 1,922 other victims or people who are seeking support on a one-off advice that was provided. Through our multi-agency procedures through the MARAC system, we've supported 239 individuals, and again that's an increase from 161 in Q2, and that doesn't include any repeat victims. Moving on in relation to our trading standards data, Chairman, is that in relation to our high-risk premises inspected, really pleased to say that we're currently trending above the target of where we should be, which is really encouraging. And I say that in the face of that trading standards, obviously over the last 2 months have been affected massively by the avian flu outbreak that they've had to deal with in the county. So to manage the avian flu outbreak and also continue to do their business as usual checks has been really impressive. Those high-risk premises inspections have included 11 animal health, 19 food inspections, 47 feed inspections, and 6 weights and measures. In relation to the illicit alcohol and tobacco situation, so we're 9,244 products have been recovered as illicit. That is from 31 visits to 25 separate premises. Out of those premises visits, we've got 14 live investigations ongoing. We have this year closed 10 premises under closure orders. Out of those 10 premises that we have previously closed down, 5 of those orders have come to an end, which has seen 3 of those premises reopened and 2 of them have remained completely closed down. which I think is a real positive impact that we've had on those communities. We'll continue to monitor and review those premises that have reopened to ensure that any locally based intelligence is acted upon, and if we have to do revisits and reorders, then we will do. In terms of unsafe goods, so we've had 2,456 unsafe goods removed from the market this year. The majority of those have been non-compliant vapes, which is 2,108. And this continues to be Trading Standards' main focus of area when it comes to unsafe products. We've currently started a project which is beginning around education with those people who are supplying vapes, because there is a significant amount of complexities, as it kind of details in the document, around levels of tobacco, type of use, type of power. So it's a complex area, and I think traders need as much assistance as possible. So there is an educational piece, and we have sent letters and education out providing advice and guidance to over 100 premises. We are obviously also doing investigative work based on our intelligence, and we've identified one supplier who we've issued over 55 suspension notices to in terms of products that they were looking to provide. So that is an ongoing and continuing investigation. That concludes my update, Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. Any questions? All right, okay. So Councillor Mrs Clark, followed by Councillor Brockway, followed by Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Martin. I just want to draw your attention to I know we've talked about the safety workshops before when it's come to this committee, but also there's now investment gone into a Friendship and Emotions workshop, and I'd like to, if you can, expand a bit on that. What does it look like? And can you just confirm to me, how are these students being targeted? Do the schools apply for these workshops? Are they automatically in there, or are we, can you give us more information about where in Lincolnshire these workshops are being set up? Because that would help me, certainly, division-wise. It would sort of give me a better idea of what's going on around these workshops, and I need to be aware of it. I think it's something that we need to look at, and I would like to know a bit more about the workshops and how they operate. Thank you.
Yeah, that's certainly information that I can get for you in terms of the breakdown, the content, and I can send that out to you so you can see exactly what forms part of the educational programme. And I'll send you the. We've got a very simple matrix that kind of explains what each element of the programme kind of delivers to across the whole of the educational piece, which I'll send to you afterwards. So I think it's an easier document to read through. Just in terms of how schools access it and how they access it, it's open and available to everybody. So all of the local schools book in through the coordinators, and we have a footprint across the whole of the county. So as I say, the 54 mainstream schools that the provision was our duty to kind of deliver to, we've expanded a lot further, and say after 51 out of those 54 schools did comply. So our calendar is always full with those schools, our county schools coming forward. So we are across the county, but I can give you a breakdown of those schools that we do attend and what elements they do pick up, because that's all recorded.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to Councillor Brockway, on a similar note there, Martin, is that workshop, is that offered face-to-face, or is that over Teams or something like that?
So at the back end of last year, it was online. So it was a hybrid. So some were online, some were dealt with face-to-face. So the option is both. It was just in terms of capacity that it's obviously easier for us to deliver some online, but it's both. It can be delivered online and can be delivered in face-to-face.
And do we monitor the impact of the workshops that have been delivered?
Yeah, so that's part of the feedback that we're not early in the journey in terms of our Stay Safe programme, but what we're recognising is actually how do we measure and impact success on the individuals, and what have they learned and what do they take away. So as I say, part of our new feedback session is that we keep the records of when pupils have had certain inputs, and then at a later stage within their schooling pathway, we will go back and revisit and ask them about what did that impact on you, how did that do? Because, you know, whether that be in 6 months or a year, that's additional work that we want to do to say, how do we measure the impact on how successful that piece of learning has been? And that's the only way that we can devise how we do it. So we can't do it obviously immediately. We get immediate feedback about how good and how they felt about the session, but we need to do revisits and retest 6 months a year, and we've not yet devised what the best way or the best timeline for that to do. So that's a work in progress, but that's what we're looking to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm focusing on the same area, actually. I'm very interested in the fact that you're delivering friendship and emotions workshops to young children, the year 2. I think that is so important. I would be very interested to know what you do there. And my reasoning is I've just been involved in some conversations with some parents of very young children, and it's been noted that they do have great difficulty handling emotions such as they fall and cut their knee, and they don't know how to deal with it. They become embarrassed, and childhood embarrassment is a very serious thing. They become embarrassed, they can't then accept comfort, and it's really quite complex. And watching it is, you know, you want to obviously make them feel better, but sometimes you can't because the child doesn't know how to accept it. And on the basis of a learning element, I would like to know more about what you're doing to improve my own response to children. So I'm very pleased to see that you're doing that. And if you could educate me a bit more, I'd be really grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly can help you with that.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested, you say you do these surveys with the kids, and it's been pointed out that some children become embarrassed, particularly in front of their schoolmates. Do you leave information behind for the school to have, so if children wanted to discreetly contact you, they can do, and therefore you've got to lead into maybe a situation that they wouldn't openly discuss? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, we do. We obviously have contacts in with all the school safeguarding officers, which enables us to have that kind of communication flow. And what we have seen is that the more and more inputs that we have into school, and the more that we are certainly talking around emotions and healthy relationships, the more disclosures we are getting. So we did see last year a rise in our disclosures in terms of safeguarding, which is all worked through with the safeguarding officers in the school.
Okay, thank you. Martin, sorry, Councillor Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a very interesting topic to talk about safeguarding and the well-being of the pupils and kids, especially in our streets. I'm going to go probably here the opposite way, because there is more to the reality, just the kids who need the safeguarding and protecting the kids, which is I totally agree with. And from here, I will send my sympathies to the families of the kids who've been drawn in the lake, which is they were playing all day, and probably the parents, I don't know what's the response on that. I'm going to come to teachers. Is there any relations or any communication with teachers? Because as far as I'm concerned, there is few schools now in Boston where the teachers have been insulted in the classes, and the kids live in the school, the class, without any sort of responsibility. And also, there is kids who go face to face with teachers, and they're telling to the teachers, if you dare touch me, you will be abusing me. Is there any work done or carried talking to teachers and seeing the deepness of this problem? Thank you.
It's not something that we're directly involved in terms of those disclosures, in terms of the pupils. Ours at the moment is focused, but it is something I can take back and see where we can, whether it's an issue that we need to take back and look into.
Yeah, please come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have another point which I would like to mention is we talk about the kids being safe in the communities and their communities. Yes, it's very important for us to save and make sure that our kids are safe in the streets, in the schools, and wherever they go. Now, living in Boston, we have a lot of families they came from Bulgaria, and most of them, they are gypsy families. So I'm pretty sure there is sometimes 3 families of 4 living in one house. So my concern here that some of the kids probably they will not be able to do their homework or probably go to school in the right time, because I can see kids with their families walking around Boston most of the time. Is there any data or any figures or any steps which is probably taken by the county or by yourselves to make sure that these kids have a good living and good standards of living? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Martin.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that's probably sits within another scrutiny panel in terms of children's, to kind of look at that and the DFE and about who does and who doesn't attend school. Ours is an educational programme around the children being safe, but I do take the point that actually they need to be in school and be educated and make sure they are, but I don't think that's for a public protection scrutiny panel. I think that's something that probably can be asked of children's.
Yeah, Chiara.
Councillor Danny, I will take your question and forward it to the appropriate scrutiny committee. And just to confirm, the question is around what provision and wraparound service do we offer around the travelling community. Is that correct? Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you. Martin, regarding domestic abuse on page 26, I note there's a drop in the year-on-year Q2 figures. Are we assured that virtual provision of MARAC meetings is effective, and could people be falling through the gaps?
So we're currently going under a MARAC review. We obviously changed to a virtual meeting as a result of COVID. It certainly enabled more services to be engaged in the meeting and turn up at the meeting because they find it easier. But we are currently going through a formal review of MARAC, looking at benchmarking, at looking at what other areas are doing, because other areas do have daily MARACs and not necessarily weekly MARACs that we do. So the system is under review to ensure that we're maximising our ability as partners to keep people of the highest risk safe. So yes, noted, and it is under review.
Thank you. And when's that review due to be completed, please?
So that should be completed by April 2023, so March, so ready to us go in to launch into a new financial year.
Okay, thank you. I have a trading standards question from Councillor King, and the question is, what is the impact of the shortage of veterinary surgeons on inspections? Has in-house training been implemented? Have adverts been considered in veterinary publications, i.e. veterinary record nursing times?
It's a question I'll have to take back to our specialist trading standards individuals, because I think it sits out of the sort of the area of me reporting on our performance.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I can see no... Yes, I can. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you. It was just a question, well, a comment perhaps on the trading standards. I go to a weekly market, and some months ago, one of our trading standards officers was attending with the police, and the following week it was noticeable that there were a number of stalls missing from the market. So actually it was working, whatever they were doing that day, and I'd just like to sort of thank the officers for what they do, because at these markets, I love going to them, but you can come across some stuff that shouldn't be on sale. So I think more of that would certainly be a good thing in Lincolnshire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Martin's nodding. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just talking about trading standards, I would just like to know how many complaints do we get from shoppers regarding probably the pricing in the shops or the quality of the service?
Not sure that we can answer that, but over to you, Martin.
Yeah, I can't answer that here today. It's not something I have, but I can certainly take it away, Councillor, and find out, see if we get that information through.
If you could come back with some figures then, Martin, for us at some point, yeah. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move over to Will then next for his presentation. Will Mason, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be able to report that performance across culture remains very strong. The performance indicator about contact with the Heritage Service, our interactions, we've hit a total of 1.7 million interactions across Q2 against a target of 1.1 million, which is obviously very, very strong and continues to build on the social media and online interactions that we built up very strongly during COVID. I'm also pleased to be able to say that in Q3, which obviously we'll come back to in a few months, we've actually started a new Facebook page for the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight Visitor Centre, so that should actually see our interactions increase even further. In terms of overall enjoyment of the Heritage Service, once again, even though we have actually increased the target, we are exceeding it quite substantially, and 98.2% of people that visit and are reporting their enjoyment of their visit are saying that it is either good or very good. So that's 98.2% of visitors. And as I've previously mentioned, we also do pay attention to other indicators in this particular area as well, because we're very aware that people, for example, use TripAdvisor. And during Q2, we've also received awards from Visit England for the quality of the visitor experience at Lincoln Castle, the collection, and the Usher Gallery. And as this is a Visit England award, it very much marks those sites as amongst the very best in all of England. So we're very, very pleased with that report as well. In terms of the visits to the library website, those continue to also be very strong. They're about 50% up on the target, with 305,000 visits to the library website in Q2. And in terms of the community use of libraries, that's also very strong. After, obviously, it had a slow kind of return to normality post-COVID. For the last 2 quarters, we have been up on our target. And there was a use of 1,970 hours of community use across our library service. I've mentioned before in the scrutiny sessions that there has definitely been a very strong post-COVID change in how people are using our libraries that's mirrored across the whole of the country, in terms that people are coming less often, but they're taking out more books and more CDs, etc. in the visit. And I think it was actually during the Q1 reporting that the question was asked on whether we could actually add some more detail to that. So I am pleased to be able to report that although the actual number of visits for libraries in person continues to be down, and this very much seems that this is going to be the new norm across the whole of the country, our actual issues compared to pre-COVID are over 90%, and during the summer they're in the region of 99% of the issues that physically we would expect across our library service. And this is on top of the fact that we are now seeing about 10% of all issues being digital, which again is an increase that happened during COVID lockdowns. And although it's dropped off slightly, it has remained higher than it was pre-COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Any questions? Councillor Brockway.
Yes, actually, my question arises out of something that Will has just said, if that's all right, Chairman,
Yeah,
rather
sure.
than the paper itself. I noticed you mentioned about CDs. Are the libraries still passing out CDs and DVDs and things like that?
Oh yes, absolutely. There's still quite a wide range of media.
Okay, could I just ask a question then? Would it be possible then for those of us who have endless collections of CDs and DVDs of great variety that they no longer wish to use, I mean, could the libraries accept donations at all? Because, they're going to skips and they're going into rubbish, and it's such a shame, 'cause it's hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth that people could use. Thank you.
That's a very generous and a very, very sensible suggestion. I will refer to my colleagues and we'll come back to you on that one. Thank you. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you very much. I was pleased to see that you're getting such an uptake on library use. As a matter of interest, do we actually promote our libraries in schools? I know schools generally have their own libraries, but they're quite limited on their availability. And I'm wondering whether, I know when I lived in Carlisle, they used to have particular sessions in library directed at youngsters. There'd be a reading story session where the under 5s would be taken care of, and then like the 6 to 12-year-olds would be taken care of at another session. does that sort of thing happen in our libraries? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It ranges and it varies across the whole of the county. But younger people continue to be an incredibly important part of our library service. During Q2, one of the reasons that some of these statistics were so buoyant was the return of the annual reading challenge, where we do engage with young people around a range of, sort of recommended books that we think children will particularly engage with and enjoy. Story times continue to be incredibly popular. Again, those were one of the kind of the community elements of our service that took a little longer to return back to normal as people were getting used to come back out into the public again. Young parents and grandparents bringing small children in is absolutely, it's an incredibly essential part of what we do. And other aspects as well. You'll quite often find people bringing their children in after school, looking for some help around homework, particularly with the access to the people's network machines and being able to use the internet if they don't have access to the internet at home.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Will. I just want to ask a question, really, about the Christmas market. I know you're Heritage Services, but do you have any input with the development of the Christmas market or anything around it? Lincoln Christmas market?
So, obviously, the Lincoln Castle is a key venue for the Christmas market. So, the Christmas market is organised and operated by the City of Lincoln Council, but they do work with the wider Safety Advisory Group, which does include, for example, the people from the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum, and that includes people from the County Council as well. My team do also take part in the tabletop exercises before the Christmas market, where they run through various scenarios, and they are part of the feedback that happens every year. So there is a review exercise, and my staff from the castle will be involved in that. I also actually have regular meetings with the Director of Communities over at the City Council, and it's one of the items that's a part of our general conversations as well.
Can I come back on that, please, Chair, if that's all right? Is that all right, Will? The reason I asked this question is because the feedback I've had from the Christmas market, which is very close to the division that I look after, there was a safety issue raised with the amount of people that were moving through it. And the police were armed, which people noticed, and it unnerved them a little bit. But having said that, the main issue that came back to me about Christmas market was the volume of people having to move shoulder to shoulder like this. And the only reason I'm bringing it up is because it's public protection. So I just really want to sort of be indulged by the chair for somebody to take this point back, that it felt unsafe to some people who were using the Christmas market. Now, we have a lot of visitors come to the Christmas market, not just from our own country, but also from abroad. And people need to feel safe, but they also need to have the room to move around and stop and shop, which they felt they couldn't do. And that was quite strong feedback coming back to me. I don't know if any other members had that, but that was the feedback coming back to me. So I really wanted to raise that point, that it's great for people to come and they need to shop and they want to stop and they want to look at it and enjoy it, but not move through like sardines where they can't stop and they can't turn around and go back the other way because it's not safe. So as this is public protection, I would really like to raise that point so it goes back somewhere for an observation. Thank you.
Yeah, valid points. I think we're just digressing there a little bit, but Martin would know better than me, just taking him out of his remit there. I mean, there's control rooms set up, I think, who's monitoring what's going on there, and it's all fed back, and I believe, isn't it, Martin? Could you just tell me a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, there's a specific control room that deals with all the aspects of the Christmas market, and that'll get fed through, and there'll be a feedback session in terms of what went well, what didn't go well, what we need to review for next year. So it can be picked up as part of that review process if we thought there was overcrowding at some stage, and then look into that. Yeah.
So there'll be a full debrief on the
there's a debrief, yeah,
on the operation, yeah, and taking Councillor Clark's comments into consideration.
Absolutely.
Too. I'm aware we've got Councillor Corey online. I'm going to bring her in now.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank Will and the team for everything they do, delivering these necessary services across the heritage and culture, and not to mention winning national awards. It's absolutely fantastic in these really difficult operating conditions. not only have we we've got the trend coming out of COVID, but as we've seen, we continue to beat our targets. And I think this is a fantastic testament, and I'm sure everyone else will agree, of the brilliant work that's been done by the public sector to deliver culture services. And so what we invest in our culture and heritage services supports what we do across the rest of the council in mitigating the effects of social isolation and supporting schools with literacy and numeracy and the arts programmes. So I just wanted to say thank you again to Will and the team.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Corey. I've got a couple of comments here, not so much questions, but one from Councillor King, who mentions that Donington Library still goes from strength to strength, with several new groups wanting to use the library outside of opening hours. This is very much the same as where I come from at Crowland. Similar things happening there. It seems to be a bustling community hub, I have to say. Just moving on from that one, Councillor Sneath mentioned that several libraries are open as warm hubs. This is very welcome and will encourage visitors to borrow books. I'm getting a nod there from Will on that one, so he agrees with that. Will, we've heard all the positive side. Is there some libraries where the footfall is probably not as good? And if there is, can we do anything as councillors to promote that, to improve that?
There's not really any library that's underperforming compared to the others. However, I would be delighted that any kind of help and action that can be brought to bear to increase the profile of our library service, and I think, yeah, particularly in terms of what you're saying about the community use of libraries and the 34 community hubs we have, perform an absolutely amazing part of their local community. They're very much services delivered by that community for that community. Those often operate purely on a voluntary basis with very, very limited budgets. Some councillors do actually interact very, very well with their local libraries. Any help that we can get is incredibly appreciated.
Thank you. I saw a hand up over here. Was that Councillor Key? Yeah, Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you. In Heckington, which is where I live, we have a very, very well-run village library. My question, I've got two little points really. One is, are there still opportunities for villages that don't have a library to apply to have one, like Heckington did when it started? And secondly, something that they do, the library shares the building with the parish council, and they collect in old ink cartridges and send them for recycling, and the money goes to charity. So I think that's a really good thing that could be promoted to stave people chucking them in the bin, because the money goes to one of our local charities and it does a really good job, and that's just a little byproduct really of that building. So that 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Will.
Yes, I'm pleased to say that there is currently some budget provision for a small number of additional community libraries to come online. It is a small amount, but if there is local interest, by all means reach out to me and we'll have that conversation. And thank you for the comment about the recycling. There's all manner of very, very similar services operated across our hubs, litter picking groups that meet and work out of their library hubs, etc. Fantastic stuff.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I'm really, the work that you're doing on this is brilliant. I'm just concerned about access for children, actually. One of the more important libraries in my division only opens 3 days a year and only opens for half an hour on one day after school is out. So by the time the children get there, they're closing. So the children in a big village have got absolutely no access to the library because of the way it's being run. And I wonder, in view of the fact that we invest, and I mean, I know that you have been very involved with helping these various people, so, there's no worry about the help that's being given, Chairman, the county's on it. But I do wonder if, given that we are supporting these libraries, is it possible to have any requirement in opening hours to make sure that children do have access? Because I would say that the children in this village are lucky to get 10-15 minutes a week. Thank you.
Okay, Will.
Yes, it's a very good point. As we've talked about before, it's a very limited budget that supports the hubs, and the requirement on those hubs is quite limited as well. I think that actually, as we are in terms of the core library offer, we're now in the second of the 5+5 year contracts. We will starting to be looking great detail at all of the different elements of the library service, both the hubs and the core libraries. And I think it's a really great opportunity. They've been an amazing success. It was obviously a new model that was only brought in 2016. And we're now coming into the next year or two. We're going to be really looking at what the successes have been and how that relationship is sustainable in the future and it goes on. We want to build on it. There's no sense that we're going to do anything other than strengthen it and improve it. We're always really keen to work very closely. Some of the hubs operate very independently. Some of them work with parish councils. But actually, you know, we're always very keen to kind of talk to them and kind of see what else can we do, what other county council services can we bring online, you know, what else can we do with children's services, adult social care, public health, etc., that can bring more to these community hubs that can help sustain them, be open for longer hours, which would be able to address the kind of things that you're mentioning. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. We seem to have exhausted that, so I'm going to go over to Lee. Lee Surdyfield next. Over to you, Lee.
Okay, thanks. So the community volunteering and community groups performance has exceeded both targets this quarter. Demand for volunteers within the communities of Lincolnshire remains high. There are currently around about 350 different vacancies for volunteers that are due to be filled, and VCS and LCVS as volunteer infrastructure bodies are continuing to work with organisations to try and fill those. What we've done is have a look at geographical coverage for volunteers, and that's pretty much evenly spread across the districts within Lincolnshire. And we've examined the reasons why people are volunteering. So if you remember previously, this committee has considered a paper in terms of needs of volunteers and what drives volunteer behaviour. And the latest figures on this suggest that volunteers are coming forward to improve chances of gaining paid employment, which is something we've discussed previously. They're seeking to build self-confidence, to give something back to their local community, and to improve their own skills and knowledge. So a range of drivers that are generating demand or supply, I suppose, of volunteers coming through. In terms of training for volunteers, 189 courses have been run in the last quarter, with 250 volunteers registered to access training, and there's now 77 unique courses available through a digital platform which help volunteers to operate safely within that space. We've also supported 362 organisations during that period from a whole range of backgrounds, covering a spectrum of different types of community support. The funding portal continues to grow in terms of strength. 136 grants are available on there at the moment, and around about 300 organisations, community organisations, now receive a newsletter that highlights all of those grant opportunities. So that's continuing to grow, and we've seen over the last quarter the activities of VCS and LCVS generate in the region of £700,000 worth of inward investment into the county through those voluntary groups. So I think they're the key points for me, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's more as a remark than a question, and I would like to have some feedback. When we used to live in London, my wife, because she was staying at home with the kids, and during the period where the kids are at school, she used to go for this free training, which is part of the community in Newham Borough. And she learned a lot about safeguarding disabled kids, kids with special needs. And you get a certificate for that, which allows some of the mothers, when the kids start to be independent, going to school by themselves, they can get jobs, which helps the community. I just wonder if we do the same thing here around Lincolnshire. Thank you.
Lee.
So the training offer through the portal covers areas such as quality and diversity, health and safety. It's got stuff around trauma awareness and disability awareness. as well as managing teams or dealing with or supporting people from challenged backgrounds. So it has a range of different topics that people can work through to enhance their skills. I don't know how many of those are qualification based. I can take that away and bring that back to the committee. But like I say, there's around about 77 different courses that are on offer that people can subscribe to. So I'll check the qualification point.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Councillor Danny wishes to come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to come back, and this is more something to share with you. Is lately there is a new charity which is opening just by the marketplace, and the lady who is in charge, she created this charity basically for mothers who had disabled kids or severe disabilities. And you know, knowing that sometimes to be a parent with a disabled kid, it takes all your life. So what she's offering in this charity is basically you can come, leave your kid with us, we're gonna look after the kids, and you can go and do some shopping or go and have a coffee with your friend and have some free time for yourself, which is, I think, it's a great idea to do, and I'm supporting it fully in Boston. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not. Thank you.
No, I wasn't, but that's something I'm happy to pick up with you outside the meeting.
Yeah, so that's noted, thank you. Yep. Okay. I see no one else, so I'm going to move on to Mark. Mark Baxter, Chief Officer.
Thank you, Chair. For this part, I'm just going to hand over to Ryan Stayson, who's Head of Assurance for Air Performance for Air File. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to devote a bit of time to our community safety measure in the prevention of this report. I will pick out a couple of the other key areas. Members of the committee will notice that we had a significant increase in total number of fires this year. The analysis shows that, not unsurprisingly, that was due to secondary fires. Secondary fires are the fires that do not involve property, typically. This is largely down to the hot, dry summer that we had. On a cold day in December, it's difficult to cast our minds back to the 40-degree temperatures we had during this reporting period, but it did see a significant increase in the number of fires that we attended, where we attended almost double the number of fires we would normally attend in Q2. We have done some analysis around the rest of the country. Not unsurprisingly, again, this is an area that the rest of the country have also seen, so we don't feel that this is an outlier that we're experiencing, particularly in Lincolnshire. It is worthy of note that extreme temperature and extreme weather events is something that we're building into our integrated risk management plan for 2024 onwards. So we're going to do some very specific and targeted work to see if the way we respond to severe weather events, so flooding and extreme temperature, is fit for purpose, and whether there's anything else that we can do in terms of training our staff, providing facilities or providing prevention awareness needs to be built in moving from 2024 to 2028. So watch this space as we build that in. We have one fire fatality during Q2 that is currently under investigation. It may well not be a fire-related fatality, but the circumstances of that event are being investigated at the minute. We continue to build capacity within our petroleum licensing team. We're meeting the needs of our risk-based inspection programme. In fact, we're over our target in that area. We've built a significant amount of capacity over the last 18 months, and we feel that we are now delivering strongly in that area. Moving back to our home safety target, members will remember that we committed to a stretch target of 10,000 safe and well home safety visits for the year. Just a reminder of the rationale for that. We set a target to significantly improve the number of home safety visits that we provide to keep the members of the community in Lincolnshire safe and well. We then went back to our management teams within our divisions and asked them what target they would like to see, and they believed that they had the capability of delivering an aspirational target of 10,000. We took that target of 10,000 largely to drive a change in behaviour and problem solving, recognising that at the time we were delivering, on average, on a 3-year average, we were delivering about 5,000 safe and well visits per year. We felt that if we incrementally increased that target, it would not necessarily drive the radical problem solving that we required in that area in order to drive improvements in performance. If we would set a very small increase in the target, our staff would do exactly what they were doing, just a bit more of it, whereas if we provided a dramatically stretched target, it encourages different ways of thinking about the problem, and therefore a bit more originality around the problem solving. We have seen that. So our stations are in the east of the county, delivering 50 safe and well visits per month per station, and they're sharing some of the best practice across the organisation to try to drive that improvement across the board. In truth, we don't expect to hit the target this year, but over a course of about 2 or 3 years, we do expect to see that target met as changes in behaviour and changes in achieving some of those home safety visits and accessing some of the most vulnerable people in the community changes, and as some of those best practices are shared right the way across the communities. I did commit at the last meeting to do some analysis about what the rest of the country looked like. I have done that. We are helped by analysis through the Her Majesty's or His Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Services. There are 13 fire and rescue services which are considered predominantly rural, and therefore the family group that Lincolnshire sit within. The methodology I've taken is I've discounted Lincolnshire from that average. I've also discounted the Isles of Scilly, as they are, again, a bit of an outlier in terms of providing a fire and rescue service. That leaves us with 11. On average, over the last 4 years, taking away the COVID year, or the most extreme COVID year, it gives us an average across predominantly rural fire and rescue services of delivering 7,300 safe and wells per year per service. We are delivering on average about 5,000 safe and wells over that same period. So a stretch target is appropriate in this case. We're not currently meeting that target, but we do aspire to exceed that target. It is also worthy of note that His Majesty's Inspectorate have also been critical of fire and rescue services over the last period of inspections, suggesting that services haven't necessarily been taking every opportunity to keep the public safe with spare capacity that they have. And that, again, is one of those behaviours that we're seeking to change and improve within Lincolnshire. It is worthy of note as well that the way that we staff our fire stations is different to a lot of fire and rescue services in the country. So to provide some explanation around that, we have a lot of our fire stations which are crewed just during the day, and the nighttime provision is provided through a different contractual arrangement. We still secure nighttime cover, but our staff are not conditioned to work what we would call positive hours, so they won't be out in the communities overnight. What this means, and the difference between a station which is 24-hour crewed, as the station that we have at Lincoln South is, they lack the ability to do their training on night shifts. So stations that are 24-hour crewed can do their training on night shifts, so safeguarding training, operational training, health and safety training, etc. They can also do familiarisation visits of sites like hospitals, care homes, etc., late into the evening. Our day crewed stations lack that ability, therefore they do all that during the sort of core daytime period, which is also the time that they're trying to squeeze that community safety activity in. I am doing some more work around benchmarking our activity against services which are also predominantly day crewed in nature, just to make sure that we are adequately targeting and being compared accurately with other fire and rescue services in the country. But I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Any questions? Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you ever so much for that. I've got a thing about targets. Actually, I mean, targets are constructs. And if you make them too easy, you're criticised. And if you make them too hard, you're criticised. So, it's, you know, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. But I can see, you know, well done for achieving all the targets that you've achieved here. There are two things I'd be interested to know about. One is, with regard to going out into the community and safety, do you ever go out to things like parish councils to perhaps show a fire alarm or something? The police used to do this and they don't do it anymore, certainly in my division. And they would come out, just give a bit of information. They'd be speaking at the beginning of the meeting and then they would leave, so they wouldn't be expected to stay for ages. I don't know if there's an opportunity for you to do that at all. And another thing I would be very interested in is the fact that when, you know, for me, anybody who goes into any of these situations that you've described here, you know, TROs, fires, things like that, they're an absolute hero just for going in, you know. And I often wonder who supports the supporters. So you out there supporting us and doing all these things for us, and I wonder who supports you. And are there any statistics for this, support protocols in place once you've been out to a particularly nasty accident and things like that? And I would just be interested to know a bit more, if that's okay. So two things, one about supporting the supporters, and the other thing about perhaps connecting with parish councils and village meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ryan.
Thank you, Councillor Brockway. To take your question about the parish councils first, we encourage our local crews to engage in whatever way they feel is appropriate in order to target their most hard-to-reach communities and those areas which are most vulnerable. We've done an awful lot of work profiling those people who are most likely to be the victims of dwelling fires. We know where those are locally around different areas of the county. We know that down to address level, so we will go and do some targeted door knocking of residents who we feel fall into that category. But we also will go and visit places like public spaces like libraries to work with the people who are most vulnerable, and parish councils is another area where we're quite happy to go and make visits. To address specifically the support and well-being, it is something that we do pay a lot of attention to. Within LFR, we have a wellbeing steering group that meets and regularly monitors the wellbeing provision that we provide to our staff. It falls into two main categories. Clearly, there is the post-incident, we call it critical incident debriefing, diffusing type activity. That is well monitored. I attended an incident earlier this week. In fact, Councillor Danny was on scene, and I did speak to him at the same time. So I have first-hand knowledge that process does work. I received a phone call when I arrived home later that day from the control room, making sure that I had access to the right support, as did the crew. So it's covered at the incident debrief, and we then monitor it over a period of time. We also provide our staff with access through Lincolnshire County Council through to counselling services, which extend beyond that critical sort of operational cover into a broader wellbeing remit. So yeah, there is a lot of that. We also train our staff to be mental health first aiders, and we've got a peer support team that provide that within LFR, and we have access to the broader LCC framework.
Okay, thank you. We've got Councillor Dunny, followed by Councillor Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank the Fire Brigade and the hard job you do. I do support you in whatever you do, and I think the statistics, they will be always there, and I think it will be hard to match every year what you're doing, but all in all, you're doing a good job. The things I want to mention is we have Sluice Bridge in Boston, if you know about Sluice Bridge. And last time, because every time we have the train coming from Skeg or going to Skegnick from Boston, we have the barriers. And, if the barriers are down, especially with the train crossing, that takes around 10 minutes. The worst one is the freight train, which takes sometimes 20 minutes, half an hour, and it blocks the whole Boston area. I was just wondering, if there is a fire on Fenside side, how can you get to Sleaford Road? How can you get to Gilbert Drive? It's quite difficult for you guys to go all around. How do you do that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it is an issue we face right the way across the county. We are a county of level crossings. We do it in a number of ways. So our crews are in constant communication with our fire control room. All of our vehicles have automatic vehicle location systems, so we know from the GPS where all our assets are at any one time. If a vehicle is delayed at a crossing, it can notify the control room that can mobilise the next nearest asset, so that we can always make sure that we're approaching it from the other side of a level crossing, should that be a specific occasion. We also have the opportunity to approach the level crossing on the wrong side of the road, go up to the barrier, and where it's a manned barrier, there are occasions where they can lift the barrier because the train is maybe sat in a station and not going to proceed. They can open the barrier specifically to allow us through. There are telephones at a number of the unmanned crossings where we can have a similar opportunity. So it can provide us with a delay. We do know where those most significant delays are likely to be, and our mobilising arrangements take account of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. It's another point, which is you mentioned the accident last week on Friday. And one of the things which is attracts my attention is lack of signage on the road, because that road especially, it has the ups and downs. It's hardly to see on the turns, it's a blind, turns. And there is no signs which is tell you to slow down. There is no signs that the road is icy. There is nothing at all there. So if you're not from the area and you're driving, you may end up in what happened last week. And I think we are here in the public protection. I think we should talk to the highways and probably they have to put signs. It's nothing that we have to negotiate with them, but I think signs has to be there because most of the Lincolnshire roads, some of them the rural ones, and sometimes the country lanes as well. You know, you don't know where you're going to, and contrary to that, when you go to France, even on the motorways, if you have a downhill, they tell you how many percent is the downhill, and then they tell you to slow down or use gear brakes, or they advise you to do things, and it's always again on the signs up, where you see them electronically displayed. And unfortunately, I mean, I drive from Boston coming to Lincoln, you don't see anything that there is a blind turn, or you have to slow down or use your brakes, or there is an icy road, which is strange. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I think we're digressing a little bit from scrutinising. You do raise some good, valid points there, and we all need to drive according to the conditions. We do have Steve Batchelor coming up soon, so we'll perhaps touch upon that on that particular item. Can I go over to Councillor Mr. Clark?
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was reading the average responses that you've got getting vehicles out to fires, and it just happened that the other day at a full council meeting we were discussing the problem of people parking in narrow streets, both sides of the road, and causing a problem. I'm just wondering whether you could work with our comms team to highlight to the public so they're fully aware of, by blocking the road, they're blocking you getting to an emergency. Thank you.
Okay, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clark. Yes, we do have a perpetual campaign that runs to alert people to the dangers that they put us in and other members of the public in terms of double parking and parking inconsiderately. We also work with highways to look at whether or not signage or lines on those roads will make a difference. Clearly, what we don't want to do is exacerbate existing parking problems by relining or double lining or restricting space further, but where there is a need to, we do work with partners to make sure that does happen.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, on page 29, we mentioned about the targets, and I heard you say you aim to see the target met over the next few years, and you've already touched upon this a little, but the target of 10,000 visits does appear to be almost optimistic and unachievable. I know you're aiming towards that, but to me, what was the reason for setting the target at that level in the first place? And yeah, I'll leave it at that for a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We had an option. We could have put an incremental target of having a target this year of 7,000, next year of 8,000, and the year after of 10,000. As I said in the introduction, I think there is a point where we wanted to use that target to drive a behavioural change and a thinking change to encourage our staff to apply a different problem-solving logic to a problem, where rather than just continuing to do the same thing but do it more, they actually change their approach and do things fundamentally differently to try to achieve a stretch target. There is also, as Councillor Brockway mentioned, there is a perversity around changing that target year on year. Our staff would feel, or could feel, that every time they achieve a target, we move the target. So again, we wanted to be really upfront and say, actually, we want to be protecting the public to the best of our ability. We want to be delivering in line with the rest of the sector. And ultimately, our view is that our staff ought to be using spare capacity to keep the public safe.
Thank you. The reasoning behind the target, as we're lacking beyond the target, is this the case of staff unavailability? For instance, could you recruit volunteers? You also mentioned confidence in the online self-assessment tool use. How will that be administered, and how do we track completion, and do we send reminders, for instance? How will that work?
Okay, so 3 questions. The one around volunteers. We have investigated using volunteers. We need to be really careful around safeguarding and volunteers. Clearly, we operate in a position of trust where we have almost unfettered access into the most vulnerable people's homes, and we do cherish that and our reputation. So any move to using volunteers needs to be done with a degree of caution, and suitable vetting needs to be undertaken in order to achieve that. But it's certainly something we're investigating. In terms of the online assessment tool, this is something that's been provided by the National Fire Chiefs Council. as one centralised way of the public being able to almost self-refer, or partner agencies being able to refer in. What that does is applies a set of criteria to someone who asks for a home safety check, which enables us to prioritise our response to that. Clearly, someone who's already got smoke alarms, doesn't smoke, doesn't have any form of vulnerability, wouldn't be the first one we would go out immediately to, whereas we do have an ethos that we would not leave a premises without a smoke detector. So if we've been in someone's home, then we would always seek to set a smoke detector in that building.
Okay, thank you. Just not to labour the point, but the historical data goes back 18 months or so. If we were to look back further than that, say 5 years or so, was we achieving more home fire safety visits at that point in time?
So I do have access to that data. 2018, 2019, we were doing 5,000 home safety visits. If you go right the way back to 2010, 2011, we were doing about 11,000 safe and well visits, or home safety visits as they were at the time. It is worth stressing that while we did resource the organisation differently then, there were different draws on our time at the time. And fundamentally, the safe and well visit was a different thing. We almost went in, put a smoke detector up and came out. We have a much more robust pathway now to refer the most vulnerable into other county council services, etc. So we do spend a lot more time in a dwelling dealing with, as I've said, the most vulnerable and some of their specific needs.
So there's more minimalistic at that time, 5-10 years ago, and they're a bit more complex now
exactly
to achieve the goal. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, that explains that. Thank you. On page 30, Ryan, what are the implications from missing the deadlines for those 14 building regulations applications? What is the risk there from missing them?
So the risk is minimal. So we will always work with building control to let them know we're going to miss the deadline on those. So for context, we had 301 building consultations in the last reporting period, of which we missed 14. So we still sit at 95%. So there is a 15-day window, 15 working days, where we're expected to provide a response from a building control consultation. The ones we typically miss are the ones that are the most complex. So doing a fairly straightforward renovation or building is a fairly straightforward response. We would expect there to be the right means of escape, the right firefighting hydrants, etc. Where you're dealing with a change to a shopping centre or a historic building, then clearly there needs to be a lot more work to make sure that there are the right compensatory features to keep the public safe. So it takes a little bit of work and maybe a little bit more backwards and forwards in before we can actually close that job. But we do work with building control in advance, so they're well aware. Okay, thank you, Ron. On page 32, regarding the cause of fires, it's important to establish a cause of fire. And it's mentioned about supervisory officers giving training. I'm just thinking if watch managers and crew managers were provided with training, this would bring the figures up. After all, it's those who have their feet on the ground and know at firsthand whether the electrical items were plugged in, etc. Even if a cause cannot be established, I mean, would a best guess approach work in certain circumstances? Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yes and no. Yes, a best guess is helpful to an extent. Where it's unhelpful is when we're compared with other fire and rescue services, and we find it difficult then to extrapolate the occasions where we were certain that there was a deliberate fire and certain there was an accidental fire from those where we've made a best guess. In terms of your point around providing training for our supervisory managers on the ground who are in charge of fire engines, we do that. So we have level 1 incident command and level 2 incident command, which are those supervisory officers which will go and do the most significant fires. There has been a change to the regulation around fire investigation standards. There is a British standard now which is in force or will be in force. We will need to comply to, so we do need to tread carefully, particularly around the collection of forensic evidence. So there have been increased demands on that, which has made it problematic for us to roll out that training to the very lowest level in the organisation.
Okay, thank you for your reply. Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks so much for the report, as ever, brilliant and in-depth. I just want to ask a small question, really, and I want to congratulate you as well for dealing with the number of wildfires that you've had to deal with over this last year because they've increased significantly and you've managed to get to them and deal with them successfully. So well done. You know, I mean, that must have been really difficult for you. The thing is about that, fire is, we used to see public information films, didn't we, a long time ago? And I was just wondering, with all your busy work that you've got scheduled ahead for the next year, and given the fact that wildfires and our environment, that's going to be on the increase, is there any possibility, or are you looking at some kind of proactive work where you can educate around fires, the dangers of wildfires, and particularly the dangers of people going into common places, common land? I'm thinking of a place close to, within my division, that some fires were started possibly deliberately and can waste your time and put a huge pressure on the service. Is there any proactive development that you're thinking about, or you can maybe take out there to help people understand the danger of fire, what it can do, the danger to wildlife, public life, etc.? Is there any move on that at all? I know you're really busy, so you probably don't want to, but I need to ask the question. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, in response to your first point about the busy spell we had over the summer period, yeah, we were stretched almost to our limit over the summer. We had one day certainly where all of our appliances were committed at incidents, and we'd sent 2 over the border to support other fire and rescue services. So, yeah, our thanks to the staff that rallied round, particularly our on-call staff who provided tremendous cover through that summer period. In terms of wildfires, that's something we're certainly picking up through our integrated risk management plan from 2024 onwards to see how we can formalise that and put it into place. Like you, I do recall seeing things like beaters in woodland, so you would see fire beaters and fire breaks and things. What we don't want to do is seek to reintroduce those if actually the Woodland Trust and other people have said that that's not a sensible or evidenced way forward. So we are working with some of those other bodies who have responsibility for public areas and private woodland to make sure that what we're doing is done in conjunction with them. We are also working with people like the Stay Safe Partnership to teach younger people about the consequences of some of that smaller fire setting behaviour, which appears to be of very minor consequence, but actually escalates very quickly into some major stuff. And we're also working on some more big ticket campaigns, things like the use of disposable barbecues and the impact of using those disposable barbecues in parks and woodland, etc. So yes, we are doing some of that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Can see no one else. I'm aware that Santa's sleigh is on his rounds and ably supported by the Fire and Rescue. And on that note, I've got a message here from Councillor King, who's online, to say, thank Donington Fire Station for supporting the various events in the village. One in particular would not happen without them. So if you could pass that back to the relevant fire station, please. Someone mentioned about the extremes of temperatures, and indeed, I think it was the 19th of July, that very hot day of 40 degrees, and we sat here. Conversely, we've got the opposite extreme now, and I've been sitting at home at nights with the heating, struggling to cope, looking at the coal fire and thinking, I'm soon going to like that damn thing. Yeah, as cold as it's getting. And with poverty on the increase too, I guess there's more people thinking the same. We need to light our open fires. Some of them may not have been lit for some time. Are we advising people, are we sending out that message about fire safety regarding open fires, getting the chimney swept and whatever? And can we do anything as councillors to pass that message on to make the public more aware?
Yeah, of course. So we are working, we've worked with the National Fire Chiefs Council to ensure that we've got a very consistent message across the country. Clearly the cost of living crisis is consistent wherever you live. What we do recognise within Lincolnshire is that we do have an ageing population. We do have therefore an increased vulnerability in that respect. What we don't want to do is give out any negative messaging around not trying to keep warm, recognising that our public health colleagues are trying to encourage the elderly and the most disadvantaged to actually turn on their heating, because there is a very real risk to health around having poorly heated spaces. So working with the most vulnerable to make sure they can heat their spaces safely is something that we are working very closely with our partners about.
So I guess that leads on to portable appliances, gas appliances, carbon monoxide detectors too. So it's also getting that message across too, particularly at this time of year. Okay, thank you. I'm aware Councillor Corey wishes to come in, so over to you, Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. I have been remotely waving. I want to thank Mark and Ryan for the report and for explaining about our stretch targets and the fire investigations and detailing home visits, and also to respond to your question, Chairman, about have we been putting comms out to alert people to the dangers of improvised heating systems. For example, those there's information going around on social media that you can heat your home using a device made of plant pots and tea lights, and what can happen when things go wrong. So that comms activity is taking place. But I also wanted to say welcome to Stephen Topham, and I look forward to meeting him properly in person in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Sorry you was frantically waiting, but rest assured, the minute I knew you was wanting to speak, you was brought in. Thank you. I think that concludes Fire and Rescue, so I'm going to go over to Stephen Batchelor next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So despite increasing traffic since COVID restrictions have been lifted and people's journeys have significantly increased, we've now seen 3 consecutive quarters of reductions in the number of people killed and seriously injured, which is of course positive. There was 88 in Q2 compared to 100 for the same quarter in 2021. As I said I would, we've now managed to update the statistical neighbours graphs that give a comparison of Lincolnshire to other areas, which continues to demonstrate how we face a number of challenges on the roads and that the number of people killed and seriously injured remain far too high. That information will be updated to 2021 in March, but we weren't able to get it until that date. I said I would try, but we wasn't able to, but that will be updated soon. In terms of the number of children killed and seriously injured, again, we've now seen 2 quarters where we've seen restrictions despite a significant increase in journeys. There were 2 children killed or seriously injured in Q2, and again that was less than in comparative years. Similar pattern demonstrated in the statistical neighbours graphs that I mentioned previously. Just wanted to respond to 2 points that were raised at previous overview and scrutiny committees. I wasn't at the last one, but I believe my colleague was asked whether or not we had met our 2020 casualty reduction targets in the strategy that we had. And so we'd seen a 40% reduction approximately in the number of people killed and seriously injured from 2000 to 2010. And then we were looking to try and achieve another 20% reduction on top of that. We did achieve it in 2015, but subsequently haven't been able to maintain that. So the answer was yes, we did at one time, but we haven't maintained that reduction. So that answers that question. The second update was for Councillor Danny. I was asked to look into foreign nationals and whether the anecdotal evidence of a higher percentage of road traffic offences involve foreign nationals, particularly within his area. I made that request to Lincolnshire Police in April. We needed to wait for the census data for 2021, which should have been released in July. That was then delayed to October, and unfortunately it's now been delayed to January as well. So it was just to update that we have agreement from Lincolnshire Police that they will provide the foreign national comparison data, and I should be able to bring it back to the March meeting, March Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You was aware that Councillor Danny mentioned one about road signs, etc. Rather than repeating it, you'll see you sat there and heard it. Any comments on that, please, Steve?
The Road Safety Partnership don't install or maintain roadside signing. As noted by Councillor Danny, it is Highways' responsibility. We do liaise with Highways extensively, particularly when it comes to areas of concern from our department. So where we've looked at accident investigation and prevention methods for certain locations, we'll ensure that we can sometimes fund those signs that are particularly needed at junctions and stretches of road where we've highlighted a casualty reduction initiative. But in terms of general maintenance and the installation of signs, of course we agree that they're important and necessary, notwithstanding roadside clutter. Basic information that keeps people safe is essential, and we'll continue to work with our Highways colleagues to highlight that where appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Maybe we could pass comments on to highways. Plus on highways, yeah. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a point I've raised before, and it's come up in a couple of my villages, and it's to do with people worried about speeding cars through residential areas, and when average speed checks have been done, when they put the strips across and do a sort of survey, and it's frustrating that we always go on the average speed, which you can guarantee is always going to come out to be at the speed limit or around the speed limit, and that's not what people are worried about. They're worried about the people going above the speed limit, and I just think, and I've said this before, I just think we put too much emphasis on the average speed, which I don't think really tells you very much, and it's the cars that are going above the speed limit that are the worry for people in these villages. And it always comes back, the surveys always say, oh, they were doing 30.1 miles an hour on average. Well, I just don't like that, and I know I've said it before, and I bet everybody's had it in their divisions, but it doesn't really get you anywhere, because there's always people going slower and people going faster, and it comes out about right. But we're not worried about that. We're worried about the people going too fast. So just to re-emphasise really what I've said before. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You wish to comment on that, Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I can appreciate the frustration. It's certainly a frustration that we share in terms of how much enforcement we're able to provide to people. I certainly think there is an element of, there's an indication of speeding, but there's been no collisions, for example, and we want to try and ensure that there's prevention. And so it's about working with our policing colleagues to ensure that that enforcement presence is available as well. Just to say, though, we don't solely go on average speeds. I recognise where communities have concern that they are going to be most focused on those that are exceeding the limit, and of course they're the ones that we want to change the behaviour. I think the average speed is important because it demonstrates where most vehicles are, and sometimes it can be slightly above or slightly below, and therefore enforcement action wouldn't be appropriate anyway. So that can be an important indicator. But primarily what I'm looking at when I consider those surveys is a combination of factors. So slight injuries and serious and fatal injuries, both numbers and the causes of those. I look at the average speed of vehicles, I look at the number of vehicles exceeding the speed limit as a percentage, I look at the number of vehicles that are exceeding the limit by a level where enforcement would commence, and I also look at the number of vehicles that are exceeding the limit by 10 miles an hour or more, and all of those are percentages as well as the physical numbers. So using that we can build a picture of what's going on the road. So you might say that an average speed for that location is relatively low in comparison or just below the limit, but there's a high number of vehicles who are exceeding the limit, particularly by high margins, and therefore that would increase the risk and we'd be more likely to take action. Maybe there's a lesson for us there in terms of how we communicate that back to parishes and communities. It might be that in trying to simplify the data, because as you can appreciate, if it's a 7-day, 24-hour survey, there's going to be a lot of data and information in there, that we're making it appear that we only focus on certain elements, but it's certainly a lot more when we take our decisions.
Yes, thank you. I think that's really good. And if you could emphasise that to people, I think that would be really good, because you almost hear the crowd, oh, well, we knew it was going to say that. And these other things are really important. Several of my villages are buying these flashing light speed indicator things, and they're having a huge effect. I'm pushing them in all my villages, and 2 or 3 are actually going to have them, and they are making a real difference. With the red and the green, it's just so simple. I have found that a lot of villages don't want to start the speed watch groups because they're a bit worried about doing that. And I've said, well, I think that's probably the best way to do it, but this is equally proving to be as good. Sure. So I'm really pushing those, and they're having a real effect. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the road safety measures, obviously this time of year it's predominantly fog and ice and snow coming, we think. Are you going to increase your awareness programme for safer driving?
Thank you. it's important, but it's probably not quite so relevant. But our communications officer retired in October, relatively short notice. So instead of us leading on the winter and drink and drug driving campaigns this year, Lincolnshire Police's communications have led. We've supported with funding and also pushing out those messages. So throughout the month of December and January, we are undertaking a winter driving campaign which highlights the particular dangers you will find at this year and ways for motorists to try and keep themselves safe. Also, I think, I don't know the exact date, but it's certainly slightly more towards Christmas. We then launched the drink and drug driving campaigns as well. So those two messages will be going on throughout the winter.
Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just a point I would like to probably know more about. It comes to my attention from the residents of Irby Street in Boston. And when you're coming towards basically the Low Bridge, both sides coming from, I think, Fidel Street or coming from Sluis Bridge and going there, a lot of people now, they're using their horns and they're beeping 3 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and some of the residents really, they're fed up with it. So I went once by myself and I stood on the road and I was telling to people, you don't have to beep, you just have to drive slowly. There is enough space for 2 cars to pass. No, it's necessary to do that. No, you don't have to, you have to slow down. I just wonder if we can have probably some sign which is, you know, a sort of, use it as a sort of education to tell to people you don't have to beep, but you can drive at 20 miles an hour and 2 cars, there is enough space for 2 cars to pass. Is that something that we can see? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That would be a highways issue, but what I'm happy to do is take that away and liaise with them directly, and I can certainly provide feedback to you on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Steve, the chart on page 40, it never fills me with pride and disappointing to see how high we are in the league of KSIs. I know we've seen the figures before about causes of accidents and whatever and general themes. What is the general trend? I mean, we touched upon speed. Is speed one of the major causes? What are the major causes in these accidents?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yep, you're absolutely right. Of course, inappropriate or excessive speed are always going to play a factor. I know I've said this before, and it oversimplifies it, but clearly if 2 vehicles aren't moving, they're not going to have a collision. As soon as you increase the speeds at various points, the likelihood of the collision occurring increases. The ability to avoid it should something go wrong obviously decreases, and then the likelihood of the severity rising increases as well. So clearly speed is always going to play an issue. More than 90% of collisions that occur throughout the UK involve some form of driver error. Very often that's going to be unintentional, but of course sometimes it's intentional as well. But that can be, you know, a number of different factors, such as injudicious overtaking, not observing appropriately when leaving junctions, misjudging people's speed or path. So there's the wide numbers. I'm just trying to, as I'm talking, see if I can get to the significant ones. So in fatalities for last year, careless, reckless, in a hurry was the highest contributory factor, and there can be more than one in a collision at any one time. Failing to judge another person's path or speed was second, failing to look properly third, then loss of control, distraction in vehicle, fatigue, exceeding the speed limit, and then they get into sort of minor numbers.
Sure, so they're the more common.
Yeah, so it's going to be, you know, say whether it's inadvertent or not, it's going to be some form of driver error that's going to be the primary cause, and they're the main ones in the fatalities from last year.
Okay, and on that similar note, do we work with our statistical neighbours where we can share lessons learnt, for instance, or are we quite insular with our own ideas? Do we spread that out and talk to our neighbours?
Yeah, I think the Road Safety Partnership still remains unique in this country, in Lincolnshire, in that it puts all of the people and the resources from agencies into one building to work together. So clearly the importance of partnership working and sharing best practice and information is one that is vital to the way in which we work in this county, but it's not limited just to Lincolnshire. We sit on various groups and various forums, be that through the Midlands Alliance, be that with previously the EMOPS policing, East Midlands policing region, and working with our neighbours throughout that, but that work continues. We also sit on various national and regional boards, so we're very keen on ensuring that not only do we receive
the best practice that's coming from other areas, but we also share it to others too. I'm also on the organising committee for the National Safer Roads Partnerships national conference every year, which has each region has up to 4 representatives, and again part of that is ensuring that we're sharing best practice around everybody in the UK and certainly throughout the world as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to go back to something that you said about the child statistics. I'm actually really worried about these, Chairman. If you look at the figures, over the last, or since Q1 2020, 72 children in this county have either been killed or injured. Now, if that happened in 1 or 2 incidents, we'd call it carnage and there would be uproar. But it's happened over a series of different incidents, and so somehow it doesn't get the attention that it deserves publicly. But if you look at the charts that you've put there, there is not a steady downward trend. We're down in this quarter, yes, but we've been down in 2020 as well. And then it goes back up, and then you've had that huge spike of 18 cases in Q4 of 2021. I think this is really worrying. 72 killed or seriously injured children is outrageous. And if you look at the chart below that, when we look at our statistical neighbours, we're at the top of the pile. It's only Cumbria is one worse than us, and that's by 1 case. I really think we need to highlight this. I mean, children, Lincolnshire roads anyway, we know are notorious because people don't change gear so often. There are long stretches where you settle into a fast speed, whereas if you're in a city, you're stop, start. There's all those factors, but I think these figures are extremely worrying. And I think we need to be doing a bit more work on that. I noticed that there's no commonality or pattern that you mentioned. But I think we need to dig deeper into this. How did those accidents happen? How many were killed? How many were serious? How many of them have got life-changing injuries that are going to affect them forever? So we need more information on that, Chairman. Those figures are too high. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockway. Steve, are you able to come back on that one, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think it's a common theme with this area in that the number of people that are killed and injured regardless of age is far too high, and if it was in any other form, if there were, for example, up to this point in time 45 murders in Lincolnshire so far this year, quite rightly people would be incredibly concerned. But there's been 45 people killed so far this year on the roads already. We know that that is entirely unacceptable and do all that we can to try and reduce it. But the unique nature of our road network and the particular mix of vehicles and road users that we have demonstrated time after time that we are going to continue to be at the top or bottom of the pile, as you've seen there. It's not a case of accepting that. It's accepting and recognising that we have a lot of work to do and we need to commit to it. What I would say, I appreciate that I'm not always sure what questions I'm going to get, so I don't always have all the information to hand. What I can say, if you look at a rolling year, so look to the end of October for 1 year and then look at the previous year before that, we did actually see a 17% reduction in the number of people killed and seriously injured in the under 16 category. So from the 1st of November 2020 to the 31st of October 2021, it was 36. Prior to that, it was 30. So the numbers are too high. I fully accept that, but they're not getting worse at this point in time. The other thing to mention is, again, I will check and get the specifics. Very often they're serious. So I think in 2021 there was no children fatally killed in collisions, and I believe it's 1 so far this year, but I will double check those numbers just to be sure and get back to you. So I don't want to diminish the points that have been made. I agree with you in entirety. We need to protect those that are younger. We do regularly look at each of the different vulnerable road user groups, including children, just to try and identify any particular patterns, areas that we need to target and highlight, where we can modify our education, and we'll continue to do that. And then the other thing to consider is, for me, if they are in pedestrian and pedal cycle situations, that is a bigger risk than if they are a passenger in a vehicle. And what I mean by that is we need to look at the problem, and it's very different. If it's a driver and they're a passenger, we need to then look at different solutions to those collisions happening than if a vulnerable road user is in a collision as a pedestrian or a pedal cyclist. And again, fortunately, the numbers are relatively low when they're in those high-risk situations in comparison to when they're passengers.
Okay, thank you. I can see no further questions. So thank you for your questions and comments. That now concludes the discussion of this item. I'm going to move that we receive the report and request that our comments from today's discussion are taken under consideration by the relevant lead officers and executive portfolio holders as recorded. Taking all the things we've mentioned, the things we've highlighted, taking all that on board. Can please members raise your hand if you agree? Thank you very much. That's agreed. We'll now move on to item 7, which is the Fire and Rescue Statement of Assurance. This item is on pages 47 to 58 of the agenda pack. The report and appendix attached invites the committee to consider and comment on the contents of the Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Authority's Statement of Assurance 2021 to 2022. The actions for this committee is that we're invited to review and comment on the contents of the report and to endorse the publication of this report on the official website. The report will be presented by Mark Baxter, Chief Fire Officer. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just go through the salient points of the Statement of Assurance, just a little bit of the background. This is our annual statement as part of the national framework. It's our commitment to give a high-level overview in regards to how we deliver against our statutory duties and to give the assurance to the public and to the Scrutiny Committee that we are adhering to our commitments. Breaking it down in regards to the financial governance, of course, as you're all aware, we are linked in with the County Council's financial reporting arrangements. Again, these are independently audited through the Statement of Accounts from Lincolnshire County Council. From 21 to 22, we saw a £10,000 overspend, which is just well within the 1% tolerance limit within our financial arrangements. We are still considered within 15% most efficient fire services within England. In regards to our planning responsibilities, we offset our documents in regards to the relevant acts and relevant guidance that ensures that we meet our statutory obligations. Our main statutory report, which is our Integrated Risk Management Plan, that has been running since 2020 to 2024. We continue with our annual review of that, and on the outcome of that review from last year indicated what our priority setting will be for this current year, which I'll touch on them later on in the report. We also have continued business continuity plans that ensure that they are robust enough to ensure that we can deal with all foreseeable business continuity events, from major incidents to lack of supply and power, to ensure that we can continue along with our business. In regards to prevention and protection, I probably won't touch on that too much because the outcomes of the 21-22 have been covered within our performance reporting on a quarterly basis, and as Ryan has given quite a detailed update in regards to our delivery against that, I feel to probably just be repeating very similar information in regards to that area. In regards to response, again, linking into our integrated risk management plan, we continually assure ourselves that we have the right assets, the right capabilities in our areas that can mitigate the risks that we've identified over that period. And again, we review that on an annual basis. Probably the most significant review of that was the addition of 2 pumping capabilities, flood pumps, that we introduced into the service from last year, and that was in respect of recognising the significant flood risk that we have across the county. We still deliver a significant amount of our response activities in partnership with some key areas across the county, in particular Echo Responding Scheme, utilising British Red Cross emergency response, bariatric response, which is linked in with adult social care and EMAS, our joint ambulance conveyancing, and also the flood rescue pumps, which are linked in with our local lead flood authority and environment agency. We still play a key role within the Local Resilience Forum, providing in 21-22 the role of the Deputy Chair of the Local Resilience Forum, and we also ensure that we are linked in with our partner agencies across the border for mutual aid arrangements, and also ensure that we can provide national support as required. So in regards to the priority setting that we realised from the 21-22 review of IRMP, we identify the priorities that we're focusing on in this year. That has include increasing the number of targeted safe and wells, developing the capacity within our fire protection team, contributing to the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership, conducting a full review of our corresponding scheme, ensuring that control staff have the systems in place to deal with complex emergencies, review support for line of business applications, developing the use of technology to improve efficiencies, increase diversity across the organisation, implementing a talent management and succession framework, reviewing business delivery models, and then developing the 2024-28 community risk management plan. We started that work early to ensure that we can gather enough data to ensure that we've got an understanding of what our future risks will be. So in summary, we are confident that the assurance levels that we've been put in place, the scrutiny and assurance that is applied through our Executive Councillor, through the Chief Exec, and also through reporting through from Public Pension Scrutiny, ensures that we are delivering against our statutory duties. And on that report, I invite questions from the scrutiny panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions? Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I'm just looking at the priorities for next year and the diversity, increasing diversity. And we've obviously heard some horror stories from other forces regarding bullying and all sorts of things going on. What do you do to make sure that doesn't happen in Lincolnshire? And if it is happening, how can we stop it? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I mean, first of all, I'd just like to say it's just it's really troubling to hear such reports that are coming through within the fire sector. The sector is an organisation I spent all my career working in, and to hear reports of some of the behaviours that are happening within my own sector is very troubling. We can't be naive that that is going to be isolated to individual services that have been in the public eye at this moment in time. I know there is a lot of national support to those services that are being identified to ensure that they have all the tools and all the support as a collective sector to support staff in their organisations. What I will say about Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue, we have a strong culture, a strong behaviours culture throughout the organisation. I don't believe we have the level of poor behaviour that has been highlighted in there. I can say that with a level of confidence. However, I can also say that I cannot be naive enough to say there are pockets of poor behaviour. It is our commitment and our assurance that wherever we do see or have evidence of poor behaviour, we address that immediately, we'll address that swiftly, and we'll ensure that the appropriate actions will be taken to ensure that those people are dealt with appropriately. But our focus is actually also in regards to the people who are the victims of poor behaviour. And I think that should be the focus for everybody, not just that's across the country. We ensure that we have the systems in place where people can report issues and concerns confidentially, often through reporting lines that don't come directly into Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue. They go into independent reporting lines, because I think that's important, that people have the confidence that they can raise issues without retribution. We also have strong networks already embedded within the organisation, employee networks, where people can raise issues, again, in trusted confidence. But it is absolutely my assurance and commitment that where we do have pockets of poor behaviour, that they are addressed swiftly and appropriately.
Thank you. I'm sure your fellow officers are just as distressed about hearing about all this as you are, because we know that is not the way that people behave. And I'm sure all your efforts are much appreciated, and this committee, I can guarantee, are 100% behind you. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just comes to my mind now talking about, the behavior. I do trust that I think things are dealt with properly in your command. However, just a question. I don't know if it's relative to what's going on. Have you ever get engaged with foreign nationalities? Especially, we have a lot of Polish, Lithuanians, Latvians, now Bulgarians, Romanians, in engaging with them in passing your messages to the other communities. Have you ever done that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yes, we do that very much at a local level, because there are different makeups of communities across our county of Lincolnshire. Our local crews and our community safety teams do actively engage with all areas in their communities. We absolutely ensure that we look to deliver the message in as many languages as possible. We ensure we actually get out into the communities to understand different cultures within the communities. We also make proactive recruitment campaigns within all communities within Lincolnshire, because we're very keen that the diversity of our crews, of our staff, match the same diversities out in the communities, because we want to ensure that we are connected with as many communities as we possibly can, because that's what we're here to serve. So where we can reflect them, we absolutely have a priority to ensure that we increase the diversity in those areas.
Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It's good to hear the process and the progression has been made. Earlier in the year, I visited the training school, and I'm wondering how are you coping at the moment with your recruiting plan and the succession that you've got going through the service? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So if I'll touch on to the recruitment, there's two main areas in regards to recruitment for us. In regards to our whole-time personnel, we have quite a detailed workforce planning strategy that gives us an indication of the amount of and the right capabilities that we need to recruit into the organisation as people are retiring or if people are leaving. So that's quite a strong recruitment campaign. We've on our second round of whole-time recruitments in the last 12 months, and we have a healthy number of applicants that we have to go through quite a rigorous and robust recruitment selection process to ensure that we get a high calibre of candidates, which we do continually get through. On regards to our on-call recruitment, that is always a challenge for us in regards to recruitment and retention of our on-call personnel across the counties. We still have healthy and significant amount of people that wish to join on-call, but we need to ensure that we've able to retain people that come through our recruitment process and when they're working on their stations. That workforce profiling definitely changes more dynamically than our whole-time profile, so we are on a continual recruitment campaign, and that recruitment process runs throughout the year, where on average we recruit approximately 60 on-call personnel a year, and that is continually year in, year out. Well, we also lose approximately about the same amount of number as well, so it is a challenge for us to increase the numbers. So we need to ensure that the people that we do recruit give us the best cover, that it's going to give us the best operational response in the areas that we need them across the county. So it won't always be that we can recruit on every single fire station, because some fire stations are far more healthier in regards to their availability than some others. So we do need to ensure that we target it at our most at-risk stations. Probably there is a third element in regards to workforce planning. We recognise that actually, particularly in some of our specialist areas, and I'll use protection as an example, that is an area that is a national challenge to ensure that we have highly skilled, trained protection inspectors coming into the county or training them up within our own existing staff. protection is a capability that has having a significantly increased demand across all fire and rescue services across the country. So we are competing with many other fire and rescue services in regards to attracting people within the organisation. So we have had a focus in training existing staff within the organisation, as well as recruiting people into the organisation. So we recognise that's going to be a future demand, but we recognise that bringing specialist people within the fire and rescue service, particularly in the protection area, is a challenge for everyone at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here from Councillor Sneath, who acknowledges that you are fulfilling your statutory duties, but are there any issues or projects that you would like to be able to carry out to improve the service even more? That sounds a bit like a wish list to me, but over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we have an embedded programme board, and we link that in regards to our, as I mentioned before, our integrated risk management plan to ensure that we have future focused in regards to the type of projects that we want to progress. Probably the area that we are keen to be doing a lot more deeper dive is probably more in regards to the development of IMT, in regards to how that can support our business applications, how it can make us more streamlined, how it can make us more efficient. That is quite a significant project in regards to probably some of the unique asks that we have within Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue in regards to some of our IMT applications. We are linked in regards to LCC's strategic IMT team, and that is an ongoing piece of work, but that's probably the one that's worth of note at the moment.
Thank you. When we last considered this item, which would have been the 2020-2021 Statement of Assurance, we received assurance over the IMT strategy review, and in particular the committee was advised that the service continually receives software updates to the bespoke packages used, and that the IMT strategy would be updated continually. Where are we on that? Where do we stand with that?
So we are linked in with LCC IMT to getting our applications continually reviewed. I think it's fair to say that the demands of IMT across the whole of the County Council has been quite significant, particularly in regards to the resources that are focusing on the development of Business World and Hoople in particular. What it means is some of our applications, that the updates have not been as timely as what we wish to be. However, we are directly linked into those work streams, and we have the assurances that they are being updated as we speak, and particularly in regards to towards the end of this year. So in regards to the IMT strategy as a whole, we also linked in regards to our a programme that's looking at how we can systems optimise in regards to all of our IMT packages, but also how we can release some of the capacity demands that we have to support our IMT applications. That work is ongoing and it's progressing well, and we're also seeing some really tangible benefits of that as we speak. And what that really is meaning is that we are trying to reduce the reporting streams that some of our IMT applications require, just to ensure that we can increase some of the capacity within our existing teams.
Okay, thank you. Last year we heard about the service maintained a collaborative partnership with Norfolk, Humberside, and I believe it was Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Services as part of a project to develop an integrated and resilient joint mobilising service. How has that progressed? Where are we now with that?
So at this moment in time, the consortium, East Coast Consortium, they've just recently gone through a procurement exercise to evaluate what options are going to be for the future control systems. Clearly, we've been very heavily linked in regards to that procurement exercise. During that, we've taken the opportunity to review what our future control provisions would look like. And through discussions with all of our partners within the East Coast Consortium, we have made the recommendations that following 2024-25 that we will be not being part of the East Coast Consortium. That is a joint decision that's been made by all of the collaborative partnerships. So we are looking for the future that actually the East Coast Consortium will be dissolved, and all of the fire and rescue services within there will look at future provisions either independently or through alternative partnership arrangements. We are looking at options in regards to what is going to be the most efficient and effective way of continuing that absolutely vital, critical function. We're absolutely steadfast ensuring that we won't have any lack of service. We won't have any reduction of service because we value the role that our control function gives to the response model for Lincolnshire and the community of Lincolnshire. And at this moment in time, we're evaluating what those options are. We have the confidence that there is sufficient lead-in time for us to present what those options are, but at this moment in time, we're not in that position to understand what that will be.
Okay, thank you. On page 51, the service received 19,000 odd calls during 2021-22 and attended over 8,000 operational incidents, including over 2,000 medical response calls. We're still seeing a difference between the calls received and calls attended, and clearly this must be down to hoax calls, false alarm calls, calls that didn't need a 999 response, malicious calls, I guess multiple calls to the same incidents. And that clearly identifies the reasons for a difference in the amount of calls and the amount of response. Could we sometime have a bit of a breakdown on that in a presentation, the amount of calls received and what they all go to? I think we've had it in the past at some point, perhaps out of the remit of this statement of assurance, but if you could sometime provide us those figures, please.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. We do have those that details, and we can link it into probably the next performance report if that would be useful for you. But yeah, we have the breakdown of those.
Yeah, breakdown of those, please. Yeah. Okay. Just remind us that the joint ambulance conveyance project, I believe that was at 3 stations originally. I note in the report it's down to 2. So there's been a bit of a reduction in service there. And was there a vehicle spare? What happened to the vehicle? What happened in that process of going down from 3 to 2?
Yeah, so this is a statement of assurance from 21-22. Within that year, as we are work with EMAS very closely on the joint ambulance conveyance project, what they recognise is the demand for that capability wasn't there within the Stamford area. The joint ambulance conveyance project is always being predicated on the EMAS's response delivery model in regards to the availability of their fast response vehicles and dual crewed ambulancing. They changed their response model, which meant that the requirement for the joint ambulance conveyancing down in Stamford wasn't required anymore. So through discussions, it was agreed that that ambulance would be taken back to EMAS and they could utilise that ambulance for other businesses within their area. We still required the ambulances over at Long Sutton and also in Woodall Spa. We did temporarily put it at Skegness because there was going to be a review of that area to see if the demand was going to be there, but that didn't come to fruition. So moving forward into this year, part of our commitment, that was our priorities to reviewing the corresponding model. The requirement for the JCP is being paused at this moment in time because, again, the demand isn't there, but part of the review of the whole of that functionality is looking at how we can provide the best response in conjunction with the EMAS's demand for the people of Lincolnshire. So at this moment in time, it's being paused.
Okay, thank you. So a bit of a reduced function there from 3 to 2. With the review of the corresponding operations, you mentioned it on page 57, do you see a reduction there in the amount of corresponding being carried out by the service?
So that is always really going to be in regards to where EMAS see where the demand is. It is our commitment to ensure that we've got the capability at the stations where EMAS say is their most hard to reach places. So we are continually committed in regards to that. Where we see in the future is we're reviewing that data as we speak We are looking at putting forward what proposals will meet EMAS's demands in regards to that. I think the overall demand for co-responding, I don't think that will diminish. I think there's the vulnerabilities that we have within the county and the hard to reach places we have in the county. There is a requirement to have that functionality, but we work hand in hand with EMAS in regards to ensuring that where we can provide that appropriately, and also with the appropriate funding that will come with that capability. Okay, thank you. I can see no further speakers, so thank you for your questions and comments. That now concludes the discussion of this item. I'm going to move that we endorse the report and that we request our feedback comments from the debate to be taken under consideration. Can members please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you. Unanimous, all agreed. We'll move on to item 8, which is the Multiply Numeracy Programme Update. This item is on page 59, I believe. And this report provides an overview on the planned activity proposed under the 2022-2023 Multiply Programme. A table outlining planned multiply provision for 2022-2023 is provided at Appendix A for committee members to comment on. The actions of this committee is to review and comment on the progress made to deliver the multiply programme, and comment on the planned multiply programme for 2022-2023, and highlight any additional areas for consideration to meet the needs of business and constituents to inform future planning. The report will be presented by Thea Croxall, who is the Adult Learning and Skills Manager. I think I'm right in saying that. Is Thea with us today?
I'm joining you remotely.
Okay, over to you, Thea, on Teams.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to update you on the progress of delivering the Multiply programme. The last update to Scrutiny on this programme was in May, when we were in the early stages of developing our investment plan for the Department for Education. As outlined in the report, our investment plan was approved. Subsequently, a call for projects was launched, and we are now working with 17 organisations across Lincolnshire to deliver this programme, as outlined in Appendix A. To help with our programme development, 2 online surveys were launched last week on the Council's Let's Talk platform. The surveys are for residents and for businesses in Lincolnshire, and there's a closing date of the 6th of February for people to respond. We would appreciate councillors' support in raising awareness of these online surveys. We are conscious that not everyone is able to complete an online survey, and so we plan to also offer residents the opportunity to complete a paper survey via our libraries and children's centres, job centres and district council offices. This activity will take place in February 2023. Providers are encouraged to engage in promotional activity to raise awareness of the programme. Examples of recent promotional activity include interviews on both Look North and Radio 4's You and Yours programme, where Boston College talked about one of their multiply courses on money management skills that is being currently delivered out of Boston's Centenary Church. So thank you for taking the time to read the multiply paper and for listening to me today. As mentioned earlier by Councillor Pepper, members of the committee are invited to note the progress that's been made on delivering the programme since the earlier paper was delivered to Scrutiny in May, and to comment on the programme that we've got planned as outlined in Appendix A, and highlight any additional areas you would like us to consider to meet the needs of your businesses and constituents to help inform future curriculum planning. And just for clarity, we're working on financial years, So the first year of Multiply will finish at the end of March 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd now like to invite members of the committee to comment on this item. Do we have anyone? Councillor Mr Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. If I remember from previous comments made about this scheme, we were made concerns about would we be able to utilise the funds up to the 31st of March next year. Can you give us an assurance that we have managed to match or use those funds effectively and that we're not going to lose any of them? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So in advance of launching the call for projects in July, we carried out an extensive awareness raising programme to ensure that organisations across the county were aware of the programme and would then be interested in submitting an invitation to work with us. So yes, we're now working with 17 organisations, and all of the funding for Multiply has been allocated to those organisations to deliver the interventions. We carry out monitoring on a monthly basis with the providers concerned to ensure that they are on target to deliver. And where we are concerned about underperformance, we either provide additional support or move the money around to ensure, as you were saying, that we spend all of our money in full in year one. Thank you.
Councillor Brockway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think this is a very imaginative programme, and I've been quite amazed actually by the diversity of it, you know, the different types of approaches that you're taking to accommodate different people. I was particularly interested in page 60 on the crafting element, where you teach entrepreneurial skills through crafting. In Lincolnshire particularly, that's a very popular thing to do, and there are loads and loads of outlets for these people then to sell their goods. The one question I would have about it is that crafting is very expensive, because the person who takes up, takes their math skills, learns them, has a small crafting business, they then have to buy all the, not just the craft, the fabrics and all the rest of it, but they have to buy the tools and possibly even things like sewing machines, and paintbrushes, all those things. So I wonder, is there any money within this scheme or opportunity to kick these entrepreneurs off with some sort of small grant? Thank you.
Thank you. So whilst learners are on the Multiply programme, their resources are paid for out of the funding. From the Multiply scheme, we aren't able to help them with further funding. However, through the wider adult learning programme, we deliver courses such as setting up your own business, where we raise awareness of grants that learners may be able to apply for. So there is strong signposting between the two different areas to ensure that learners are aware of the opportunities that are open to them. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's really interesting. I just wanted to ask you about the uptake for numeracy courses aimed at prisoners and those recently released from prison, as I have Lincoln Prison sitting on the edge of my division. And I just wondered what the uptake was like for that, because there are courses aimed for prisoners within there around literacy, poetry, journalism, and they are keenly taken up. I just wondered what the uptake was like around numeracy courses for prisoners within Lincolnshire, and what sort of feedback, because I can't see it on your list below of employers that have taken it on, so I thought I would just pick that up and ask. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So there's one provider, that's 3 counties, who are delivering the intervention for people who've been recently released from prison. To date, we've had very little interest in that intervention, and we're doing a lot of partnership working with organisations like Lincolnshire Action Trust in order to try and raise awareness and increase interest in that intervention, because we're obviously keen to ensure that we are working with this vulnerable group. Any support that you might be able to offer would be appreciated on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look into that for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Of the 19 multiply project bids received, we see 17 projects on, I think it's page 63 and 64. Can you tell us what criteria were not met? Is it felt that participation was within anticipated levels, please?
So we've had one provider who was offered a project and decided they didn't have capacity to deliver it. And then the other project, sorry, there were two projects for one provider in there. So that takes account of all 19. One provider has got projects in the community and one project's out for employers. So all criteria were met. The challenge that we had was ensuring that we've got provision across Lincolnshire for all of the 10 interventions that we're delivering. I think that answers your question, Councillor Pepper.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got just a few more here for you, Thea. What can we do better going forward to attract more participation in the next years, please?
So we've been delighted with the way that providers who are working on this programme have taken on the mantle of delivering creative courses in maths. So I remember when I was at school and I got my O levels, obviously a few years ago, and I was taught by somebody wearing a cap and gown, and maths was taught in a very, very dry way. Whereas through the Multiply programme, we've got some really creative programmes, such as money management, feeding your family on a fiver, using budgeting skills there. So the secret has to be about bringing maths to life and delivering it in a very hands-on, practical way and making it relevant for people within Lincolnshire. So we are hoping that there will be more of that based on the successes coming out of year one, in which to base provision for years 2 and years 3. Thank you.
Are we expecting that these projects will carry on in the coming years, or will they have to reapply, please? Organisations who are delivering Multiply in year 1 are required to submit an intervention plan for years 2 and then further on for years 3. Similarly, we are required to submit our wider intervention plan to the Department for Education. At the end of year 3, we anticipate that the funding will then become part of the Adult Education Budget Programme, but that there will be greater flexibilities within that funding stream for delivering new numeracy projects. Thank you. Okay, thank you. How do we intend to monitor performance of each project, please?
Providers have got a target that they signed up to at the beginning of the programme, and that is monitored on a monthly basis. So they've got a target of the number of courses that they'll be delivering and the number of learners that they will be working with on the programme. Further down the line, we will be looking at the impact of the programme on individual learners and what they've gone on to do next. You know, whether they've signed up for an adult learning course, whether they've got into employment, whether it's just moved them on their journey to further education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just one more. What support do we offer to those delivering programmes, please?
Through the adult learning programme, we've got a team of experienced staff in place who already support our adult learning providers, and they are using those skills to support organisations delivering Multiply in terms of empathy, but also knowledge about promoting courses, how to engage with learners, how to put their enrolments onto the system so that we are able to report out on them. So there's a whole raft of support in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I can see no further questions. No. Okay, so Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. I'm going to move that we endorse the report and that we request our feedback comments from the debate to be taken under consideration. Can members please raise their hands if you agree? Thank you, that's all agreed. We now move on to item 9, which is the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. This item is on pages 65 to 68 of the agenda pack. The report will be presented by Chiara, Scrutiny Officer. The actions of the committee were invited to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. So, without further ado, over to you, Chiara.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. This item enables the committee to consider and comment on the content of its own work programme for the coming year, as to ensure that scrutiny activity is always focused where it can be of greatest benefit. May I remind members of the committee that this work programme is being reviewed at every meeting of this committee and updated accordingly and appropriately in line with new items suggested or requests made by the committee. In our next meeting, which is now going to be the meeting on the 24th of January 2023, we are going to be considering a pre-decision scrutiny item, which is the review and, apologies, of revenue and capital budget proposals. And the views of the committee will be reported to the executive for their decision making on the 7th of December, which following that, there will be a further council decision on the 17th of February 2023. We are also going to be receiving the Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Progress on Response to the inspection outcomes from Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. And we are also anticipating a trading standards food update, which will be including sources of intelligence used by trading standards, which has previously been requested by members of this committee. We are also going to be receiving an update on resettlement schemes, which will be including Homes for Ukraine sponsor scheme in line with previous reports received around the humanitarian crisis and how we're supporting and dealing with it. When sitting as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee, we will also be receiving the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership Update, which is an annual update. And this concludes my update to you and members of the committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Mr. Clark.
It's not so much a question, Chairman,
sure,
but to advise you on the 24th of January, I will actually be absent from that meeting. Thank you.
I think we did advise us of that. Does that include both of you too, doesn't it? Or are you going your separate ways? No. Okay. That's both of you, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay. No questions then, so I'm going to move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed on pages 65 to 68 and the additional items highlighted by the Scrutiny Officer. Can you raise your hand if you agree? Thank you. That's all agreed. We now sit as the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee. Just to tell you, the Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Committee is established under Section 19 of the Crime and Justice Act 2006. And item 10 is the work of the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership, Reducing Offending. This item is on pages 69 to 74 of the agenda pack. The report provides the committee with an overview of the actions undertaken by the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership to tackle proven reoffending in Lincolnshire. The actions for today is that the committee is invited to consider and comment on the contents of this report and consider the progress made by the Safer Lincolnshire Partnership to reduce proven reoffending. The report will be presented by Zoe Walters, the Community Safety Strategy Coordinator, who is in the Council Chamber. So, over to you, Zoe.
Good afternoon and thank you, Chairman. So, as noted, I will provide an outline of the current work by Safer Lincolnshire Partnership to reduce reoffending in Lincolnshire. This work falls under the remit of the Reducing Reoffending Core Priority Group and is also aligned to the strategic priorities of Safer Lincolnshire Partnership to reduce reoffending, committed by females and those aged 18 to 24. These priority target groups are based on a strategic needs assessment completed in 2021. The work has progressed through a delivery plan for 2022 to 2025, and we are in the very early stages of planning and delivery. If at a later date more in-depth information is requested around a specific area that I've highlighted, I'm more than happy to provide this at a future committee meeting. I'll now briefly cover some of the key elements on the delivery plan. So within the report, I make reference to the Integrated Offender Management System. This is a partnership approach led by police and probation to work with those identified as committing high volume and high frequency offending. It provides enhanced supervision and evidence-based interventions to address pathways of offending behaviour. So, for example, substance misuse, homelessness, elements such as that. Another work stream we have at present is the Lincolnshire Women's Strategy, which aims to support women and girls at risk of entering the criminal justice system. This is a whole system approach informed by the voices of women in Lincolnshire, and it seeks to use new and existing work streams, so not duplicating what's already in place. It's about collaboration and working together across the system. It aims to increase diversion from the criminal justice system of women and girls, use a women's centre approach to provide safe spaces for vulnerable women and girls in our community, for example, those that are experiencing domestic abuse. Our approaches will be trauma-informed, and that will be bedded across all work streams. And also, it's worth noting that Lincolnshire County Council have signed a concordat to commit to the delivery of this strategy. Another work stream is the Lincolnshire Prisoner Release Housing Protocol. This seeks to reduce levels of homelessness for males released from Lincolnshire prisons, so specifically HMP YOY Lincoln and HMP North Sea Camp, who are being released into Lincolnshire, so into our county. It's a partnership protocol between all 7 district councils, probation, prisons, Lincolnshire Action Trust and other relevant housing providers. This was launched in June 2022, and it's also embedded into the Lincolnshire Homelessness Strategy. An evaluation report is due to be produced by the end of Q4 of this financial year, and then we'll take that learning and review the protocol. Another element of work is the Lincolnshire Mental Health Treatment Requirement Pathway. So this is an evidence-based pathway to provide an intervention where mental health is linked to offending behaviour. It is for those who meet the threshold for a community sentence. As such, it can only be imposed by the local courts. It also seeks to improve partnership working within the remit of mental health, but also we recognise that often there's what we call dual diagnosis, where those with mental health concerns may have substance misuse challenges as well. The key leads that we are working with are Lincolnshire Partnership Foundation Trust, We Are With You, Probation Services, NHS England, Courts and Lincolnshire Action Trust. We've also submitted a business case to be part of a national evaluation led by the University of Northampton. I'm just awaiting the outcome of that bid. However, I've been advised it is looking favourable for us. We're looking to launch this new treatment requirement by Q4 of this financial year, and this work is overseen by a steering group. In conclusion, as you can probably see, this is a complex area to work in, but work streams that we are focusing on are evidence-based, and they also include a focus on diversion and early intervention. The work streams evidence strong partnership working with external partners, but also across directorates within Lincolnshire County Council. The focus areas are aligned to the current needs profile for Lincolnshire. The partnership, of which LCC is a core member, seeks to address the factors that underpin offending behaviour to reduce offending, reoffending, and in turn reduce victims and the impact of crime on our local communities, and as such have an impact upon the level of services that these individuals access. And that's it now. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open it up for questioning. Any questions? Councillor Mr. Clark.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got a number of points, and if we take them one at a time, I don't want to bombard you. On the safeguard, what effects what if efforts are being made to help reduce the reoffending? It says you're doing it, but there's no comment there on how it's been done. Could you give us any indication?
My apologies, I'm not completely sure I understand your question. Please may you repeat it for me?
The efforts that are being made to help reduce reoffending, could you explain what they are? Because it just mentions that, but there's no meat, as it were, to the bones. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the various work streams that I've referenced within my report, they are targeted at particular areas that contribute to reoffending. So where I make reference to offending pathways such as homelessness, mental health, elements around how females can be stigmatised within the criminal justice system, these work streams are there to address those factors. What we're in the process of doing is developing the performance framework around some of these elements and evaluation mechanisms, so that then we will be able to report back with more data as such, so that we can evidence the impact that these work streams are having.
Thank you for that. I was pleased to see that you've got a women's strategy, because obviously they tend to be the more vulnerable, and I wish that every success. Regarding your prisoner release, I know you say you're going to give us some data in the fourth quarter, but to date, what feedback have you had? Is there good results? Is there anything you're learning as you're going along? Thank you.
So our evaluation mechanisms, we've got two processes for that. So we're just launching the qualitative, so the numerical data set collection form out to partners, and also we've got engagement stakeholder feedback, which is being facilitated by the University of Lincoln. So in terms of that feedback, what we're hearing is that the protocol is becoming embedded across the areas. There's some tweaks in terms of reducing the size of the document that goes out to practitioners, and that's an easy fix, so that they are absolutely clear what steps they take on the ground. What we are seeing is that the duty to refer, so that legal requirement to refer somebody to a local authority if they are at risk of being homeless, is being undertaken. What I can't give you right now is that numerical data in terms of where we were in May pre-launch, and then the impact that this protocol has had, but it will be available.
Okay, thank you for that. Do you know, for instance, that when a prisoner is discharged from any of these prisons mentioned, are they given, as it were, like a help pack? So they've got something visible in their hand that they can then refer to once they're settled somewhere. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So there's numerous support mechanisms that are in place. So at HMP YOY Lincoln, there is a departure lounge, and that is led by Lincolnshire Action Trust, but it's a partnership approach in terms of looking at practical situations such as how to get to their initial supervision appointment, when that will be. There's also elements around linking them in with the Department for Work and Pensions for their benefits when they're released. If they need additional support in relation to maintaining abstinence from substances, then they will be linked in with We Are With You as well. Equally, in addition to that, there is the role of the community offender manager within probation. So a huge element of their role is to create what's called a resettlement plan. And that is linking in with the departure lounge, but also having that contact with the prisoner before they become a person on probation, to ensure that they have what they need. And my understanding is that there is a small grant given by each release in prison to support with the initial cost of transport to get to appointments. So it's a multi-agency approach to wrap around that individual.
Right, thank you. And my last sort of question and comments. I did watch the video, where they gave information and details about the efforts being made up in Manchester, I think it is. That seems to be a very good scheme, and I see we're going to adopt that, but it's very much a helping hand approach, I think. And that, again, is almost trying to prevent issues escalating with people that have got mental health problems. And I commend that approach. Thank you.
Yes, that is absolutely the approach that is being taken, and also whilst I note that it is the launch of the mental health treatment requirement, part of that steering group's focus is also to increase the use of other community sentence treatment requirements. So that could be a drug rehabilitation requirement or an alcohol treatment requirement. And again, that's around those different evidence-based mechanisms. We're taking learning from other areas to, replicate the success that you have seen in the video that was provided, and adapt to Lincolnshire as well, of course. We are a very different area.
Councillor Brockway, followed by Mrs. Clark, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman.
Been a long day.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a lot in this paper, and thank you very much for that. But I don't know, I suspect I might feel the same way as Councillor Mike Clark. I'm not putting words into your mouth. I've got the what here, what you're doing, but I don't know how you're doing it. I feel as though I need an awful lot more detail to scrutinise this. So, for instance, on page 72, halfway down the page, you've got a paragraph on Lincolnshire Women's Strategy, and there are links, and I've gone to them, and nothing comes up on the page. That might just be an internet issue, okay? But I've come away not knowing what our strategy is. So if I'm going to scrutinize, it's great. We've got all the lists of things that we're doing, and fixed cohorts, flex cohorts, free cohorts. I need to know what we're doing. What are these? What are we doing? Can I have some examples? This is a huge subject. I would say that this is just the cover paper. And in order to scrutinise this, Chairman, I need a lot more detail. I'm a little bit worried that I'm going away from the paper still knowing nothing.
Okay.
So what's there is really good. I'm not slamming the standard of your work or anything like that. In fact, we need more of your work for us to do a proper scrutiny job. And I wonder, could we have this back? Even if it's just sample details, because I'm asking essentially for a huge piece of work here. It'd take a month to give the detail of all that's in this cover paper. But I really would like some examples of what they're doing, how they're doing it, and more detail, please.
Thank you. I do note at the very end of the report that should the committee express an interest in a more detailed paper with reference to one or more of the work streams highlighted today, this can be provided in line with the planned committee scheduling. Your thoughts on that, Zoe, and I'll just turn to you then, Chiara, in regards to fitting it in.
Absolutely, and as I said in my conclusion, and as referenced by the councillors, it is a huge area of work. So I was very conscious that it has been a little while since this area of work has been presented to the committee. So as a first step, this was around providing that general overview and the flavour for the work. I am more than happy to be guided by the committee as to what you would like me to focus on in a follow-up paper. What would be challenging is if I provided detail for every single element of work, because that would be a huge document.
Sure. Councillor Brockway.
Yeah, could I just make a suggestion? Obviously you can't, I mean it'd be pages and be here till Christmas next year, but you could provide a number of live links so that we can dive in. Somebody who used to do that very successfully was Jasmine Sodi. It's worth talking to. I think she's retired now actually, in the business. She would give links where you could dive into a link and go deeper and deeper and deeper. You could go 100 different directions in her reports, and so the report was short and succinct in the way that this one is, but I could then delve in any direction I wanted to go. So it's the links I think are important, so that if I want to know what flex is, I can go and find it. If I want to know what the women's strategy is, I can go and find it, and that way you can keep your report short, but we can get the depth we need, if that's possible.
Yeah,
now, it may not be viable, so do tell us if it's not. Thank you.
Absolutely, I can provide the links. Unfortunately, they just haven't worked for whatever reason within this paper. And within the paper as well, there is a link to the National Integrated Offender Management Strategy, and that provides an overview of the different cohorts. But I am still happy to add additional links so that that can be expanded further in the future.
Okay, thank you. Kiara, that fit into our work programme at some point?
I would say from March 2023 onwards, if we were to look at a suitable date that would not destabilise our the balance maintained in each agenda formulated for our meetings. So we can work offline together, Zoe, to identify a suitable
Okay,
date
that would be
and
good.
come back.
Yeah,
Thank
sure,
you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I had a hand up over here somewhere, didn't it? Was it Mrs. Clark? Yeah, Councillor Mrs. Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, I need to reflect the feelings of my colleagues there, that I was really looking at this with a lot of interest. And I can see that your cohorts went live in December 21. And I'd like to know the effect of the fixed cohort, flex cohort, and what they are. So it's detail and how successful they've been. And actually, looking at it, it says at the bottom there on page 71, once all cohorts are live. Now, are they not all live at the moment? Is it the free cohort that's not live? Because we're looking at it as if they're live, but they're not all live. So that's a bit confusing. And then it's just for a total of 120 individuals, which seems like an awful lot of work and a lot of strategy for very few people. So there's that I want to sort of question and try and align. There's probably an answer for it, I'm sure there is, because this is really, and it is a huge, huge subject. Also, I'd like you to explain to me, it says on page 21, what is meant by the local problem profile. I need to know what the local problem profile is, where it is across the county. Is it in different parts of the county? Is it just in Lincoln, Boston? You know, so I need to know what that profile is, because it will affect us, as my colleagues have said, deep down. We'll do a deep dive on that, and then we'll naturally go and look at our own divisions and think, ooh, we need to do some work in there. We need to highlight that, which will help you. We want to help you. And then the other thing I noticed when I looked at the Lincolnshire Women's Strategy, I did manage to access it. It says that Lincolnshire is behind other areas in the provision of women's centre services. I'd like to know why. Why is that? Because we lead in so many other ways. We're very good at that. So if there's been something that slipped through the net, something we've missed, because we are not capturing support for young women at the age of 15 to start to become part of the criminal justice system, that's very sad. That's shocking, really. So we do need to look at this, I would say, Chair, in a lot more depth, and maybe and bring it back as soon as is possible. And I know that March has been suggested. So I'm really interested in the comment, but I really, like my colleagues, would like the detail that we can then look at and analyse more deeply so that we can understand it better and perhaps interact with you more. Thank you.
Okay, I do sense the mood of the committee, and I'm sure you do too then, Zoe, regarding that. So if you could do that for us, yeah? Okay. Any further speakers? No? Okay, so thank you, Zoe, and also thank you, members, for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion of this item. Again, I'm going to move that we endorse the report and that we request our feedback comments from the debate to be taken under consideration, highlighting those in particular about being more in depth. Can members please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you, that's all agreed. That now brings us to the end of the meeting. So that concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance. I am assured there's some mince pies here somewhere, so please, unless someone's eaten them all, so please feel free to indulge before you go. Thank you. Okay. That's not an empty plate there, is it?